Chapter 554. Although the snake-shaped sword appeared briefly, one could tell that it was not an ordinary item. However, the myriad spirits' calamity water was the best at dirtying things. Even a profound-level weapon could be easily destroyed if it was not careful. Hence, when it reached Feng Haiyang, its spirituality was mostly gone. With a light wave, it was destroyed. In the blink of an eye, Wu Hanqing was torn apart by countless devils. His severed body and limbs were torn apart as food. At this time, an illusory spirit emerged from the body, its face filled with panic, as though it was trying to escape back to the sect. But before he could move 30 feet away, a demon howled and rushed over. It tore open its mouth and swallowed him whole. Perhaps it was because it had absorbed all of Wu Hanqing's vitality, the water had received a lot of nourishment. The originally black water had become a little richer. The few elders from the Pingdu sect had ugly expressions on their faces. Feng Haiyang and Wu Hanqing had exchanged blows in such a short period of time. They did not expect this to happen. Even if they wanted to save their disciples, they could not do so in time. Fortunately, Spirit Venerable Huacheng had something special, so he wasn't afraid of being swallowed by the ocean of wind. This item was the most valuable treasure, the Hidden Appearance Pagoda. It was formed by the faith and dharmic powers of the Pingdu sect. Even if it was killed by the enemy, as long as the pagoda was not lost, it would not take long before it could be worshipped again. The cultivator surnamed Yu and Yang Bai watched as Wu Hanqing persevered for only a moment before dying in front of their eyes. They were both alarmed, but neither of them had any intention of surrendering the decree. The cultivator surnamed Yu thought to himself, this person's strength is at the second level of Yuanying. He's not someone I can withstand. If I want to take the talisman, I'll have to fight him using ordinary methods. This is definitely not feasible. He began to quickly think of a countermeasure. After a few thoughts flashed through his mind, he already had an idea. This method had a high chance of winning. However, he only had one chance. If he failed, not only would he not be able to eliminate this demon, but he would also be unable to do so. He even wanted to sacrifice his own life. He took a deep breath and thought, my Inata temple has annihilated countless demonic sects in the past thousands of years. How can we retreat in front of this evildoer? It's just risking our lives. He looked around and saw hundreds of devils dancing around his protective treasure light on the bluish-green sword. He took out a fierce sun pearl from his palm and tossed it above his head. Those demons could not get close. As soon as they were illuminated by the pearl light, it was as if they had encountered a scalding hot stream. Immediately, wisps of green smoke rose from their bodies and they let out miserable howls. After suffering such a loss, wherever the light shone, they seemed to be in extreme fear. All of them made way for him. Taking advantage of this gap, the cultivator surnamed Yu turned to look at Yang Bai and solemnly said, Taoist Yang, allow me to consult Taoist Feng first. Yang Bai was surprised. Although the various sects were not allowed to gang up on each other, Feng Haiyang had taken the initiative to attack. That was an exception. If the two of them took advantage of this opportunity to join forces, they might not necessarily lose even if they could not defeat Feng Haiyang. However, the meaning behind Taoist Yu's words was that he wanted to fight one-on-one. With a wave of his hand, he sent out over 100 beams of sword light, driving away all of the demons around him. He turned around and was about to speak, but when he looked up, he saw a resolute look in the cultivator's eyes. It was as if he had made some sort of decision. He couldn't help but be startled and his lips moved. His lips moved, but he didn't say anything. He sighed softly and kept his sword. He stepped on a cloud and escaped far away. His voice traveled over from afar, Taoist Yu, be careful. The cultivator surnamed Yu bowed to his back as a form of thanks. He turned around and stared at Feng Haiyang. There were only 2 disciples from Inata temple. His senior brother Chen Qingping had already died. If he were to die here, then he would no longer have the strength to fight for the Gantian Junyang. The decree that was sent down should belong to Inata temple. If it was lost, he wouldn't even be able to go to the Jiantian heaven, much less get the item. One could say that he had nowhere to retreat to. But if he killed this person, the outcome would be different. When he thought of this, he became even more determined. He slowly bowed to Feng Haiyang and took a few steps back. Then, he spread out his arms. When the sky was in the middle of the sky, a clear shadow floated like dancing leaves. He actually shot out hundreds of green bamboo thunder talismans in one breath. Feng Haiyang's expression didn't change, and he stood still. The strong cloud above his head spun, and a mighty strong wind immediately appeared. The thunder talisman didn't even get close to the strong wind before it was swept away by the wind. The cultivator surnamed Yu shook his head. His opponent's cultivation and mana were both more profound than his. Just by using the swirling astral winds, he was able to force him to not be able to get close. If he used a magic weapon to attack, it would be easily contaminated by the tribulation water. If he did not come up with an extraordinary plan, it would be difficult to fight him. He took a deep breath and stepped on the brocade cloud. Relying on the flying speed of the magical tool under his feet, he suddenly turned into a flash of light and flew over. The hundreds of devils had already gained intelligence because of the struggle for the Great Tao. Chapter 291, Death. The seal reappears. The tribulation water couldn't be retrieved because of the precious pearl, and they didn't dare to get close. However, seeing that he was moving, they immediately rushed over without a care. Under the siege of so many devils, the precious pearl only lasted for a short while before it shattered into powder. The devils became even more frenzied, and they continuously tore at the last ray of protective light. The cultivator surnamed Yu was calm. He reached into his pouch and took out a bundle of jade scrolls. He mumbled something and threw the treasure above him. The jade scrolls suddenly made a sound like leaves colliding. They unfolded in midair, and finally became 1,000 feet long. The cultivator surnamed Yu raised his finger and shouted, "Collect." The jade scrolls suddenly trembled, and it immediately released rays of jade qi. At first, it was like the warm light of dawn, but in the blink of an eye, it was overflowing with brilliance. It swept for thousands of feet, and it was as bright as the sun. In an instant, the dazzling light swirled once, and it swept away all the devils within 1,000 feet. Yang Bai, who was watching the battle from afar, had his eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but praise in his heart. The Huanjin Temple was different from other sections. Their Xian technique specialized in suppressing the secret and evil arts of the evil sect, which was why they had such a result. However, if it was him, even though he would be able to charge in, he definitely wouldn't be able to do it to this extent. He might even be surrounded and killed by thousands of devils. On the shore, Elder Shen from the Guangyuan sect was also envious, and he thought to himself, my Guangyuan sect's talisman decree also has the ability to seal devils, and the forbidden talisman of the door-holding talisman can do it. It's a pity that we are lacking the two sects of Huanjin and Huanjin, and we have lost our foundation. If we can get Jinren Zhang's help, we will be able to get what we want, and find the two lost talisman techniques back to the mountain. With the 5 talisman techniques combined, we will definitely be able to revive the sect. After the scroll collected all the devils, it let out a clear hum, and with a crash, it closed back into a bundle, and fell to the ground. The cultivator surnamed Yu did not extend his hand to catch it. At this moment, he had already rushed to the front of the astral wind. His eyes flashed, and his shoulders shook slightly. The peachwood sword on his back flew out of its sheath, and with a point of his finger, it slashed down and tore the astral wind apart. Then, he shouted loudly, and with a leap, he rushed into the inner circle with incomparable courage. Up in the sky, the turbid waves of the Xian River surged rapidly, and almost dyed the sky black. But at this moment, a ray of light came from the distant sky, and just like a firefly that lit up the entire sky, it entered the astral wind without hesitation. When the cultivators on both sides of the river saw this, their palms were all sweating, and they couldn't help but take a few steps forward, watching nervously. Even Sun Huaying, Hu Xian, Zhou Huang, and the others were watching without blinking. They didn't expect that Daoist Yu could actually break into the astral wind created by Feng Haiyang. At this moment, the cultivator surnamed Yu's expression became more and more focused. To deal with Feng Haiyang, there was only one way, and that was to sacrifice one's life, and use the secret technique, demon sealing sacrificial ritual of absolute yang. This sealing technique could reach a distance of a few miles, and once it was used, no matter how high the opponent's cultivation level was, as long as they haven't entered the Grotto Heaven realm, they would all be sealed within the sealing seal. Under the envelopment of this technique, they would all be sealed within the sealing seal, and there would be no way to escape. However, after this technique was used, all the spiritual opportunities that came into contact with the technique would be suppressed, and it wouldn't differentiate between friend and foe. That was why he had to leave Yang by his side and face the enemy alone. However, the Netherworld Spring faction had a rather famous Netherworld escape technique, and it could fly and disappear without a trace. The cultivator with the surname Yu was worried that if he used this technique from 100 feet away, Feng Haiyang might use this technique to escape, and so he had to find a way to break into the inner circle. At this moment, he suddenly felt his body lighten, and he knew that he had broken into the astral wind defense of Feng Haiyang. At this moment, there was an additional jade token that was emitting a bright glow in his hand. Looking at the tall and straight figure that was standing not far away, he knew that even if the figure reacted, he wouldn't be able to escape. He smiled lightly, and said, "Sage Feng, forgive me for not sending you off." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his palm and touched the talisman without hesitation. In an instant, there was a blinding golden light that burst forth and lit up the sky. Feng Haiyang saw the golden light enveloping his body, but his expression didn't change at all. The next moment, he and the tribulation water beneath his feet were completely submerged by the golden light, and he was forcefully pulled into the jade talisman. When he looked at the sky again, it was already clear, and the haze of Yin had dispersed. The cultivator with the surname Yu looked down and saw that there was already a sealing seal on the jade talisman. His eyes were filled with gratification, and he kept the item in his sleeve. He then looked up to the sky, and looked at the talisman that was floating in the sky. He smiled, and turned into dust in the sky wind. On the peak of the Qinsang school, Hu Xian retracted his gaze and sighed in his heart. The two disciples of the Anata temple were willing to risk their lives and fight with their lives, so their Taoist heart must be unparalleled. However, the strong must be broken. If they knew the way to advance and retreat, their achievements in the future would be far greater. Daoran Ingya's beard trembled, and he stood up from the altar excitedly. His expression was filled with joy. On the surface, this battle seemed to be a stalemate for both sides. However, Taoist Yu managed to get rid of Feng Haiyang, who was covered in demonic flames. Now, there were only 5 disciples of the Devil's Doctrine left. Later on, when they head to the Jotian realm, Xian Men's chances of winning would be greatly increased. However, his happiness didn't last long, and he suddenly heard a strange sound. He turned his head to look at the source of the sound, and his expression was filled with fear. He saw that in the clear, cloudless sky, a drop of black water suddenly floated over. It gently swayed, and the sound of flowing water could be heard. After floating for a while, it suddenly spread out, and turned into threads of thick black ink that rippled and churned. After a while, there was a loud sound of water crashing. However, in an instant, the black tribulation water appeared again, and it spread out in the sky. Feng Haiyang's tall figure slowly rose up from the torrent. First, it was his head, then his shoulders, then his chest, and finally his entire body. He stood on the water without any damage. The black wind behind him fluttered, and he stood there like a demon god. He calmly looked at the people in the Changyuan Gorge. Chapter 555. When the crowd saw that Feng Haiyang could not even suppress the demon-sealing sacrificial ritual of absolute yang, they knew how powerful this ritual was. They all felt a chill down their spines, and fear grew in their hearts. Only a dozen or so people remained calm and unmoved. Zhang Boyan smiled and shook his head, that Jinren Yu from Huanjin Temple is courageous, but his luck is not that good. His fellow disciple has already used this technique. My martial nephews saw it and must be prepared. Why would he give him another chance? Moreover, he was too hasty in his actions. If he could have calmed himself down and investigated a little before he made his move, he wouldn't have lost his life. Zhang Yan smiled and nodded in agreement. The illusory water of 10,000 spirits was a combination of mana. The waves of ink that everyone saw were just an external appearance and not the real thing. Feng Haiyang looked like he was still in the same place, but he had already left the circle. He was just using the technique of substituting himself with a demon. This technique was not without flaws. If that Jinren Yu had opened the interior Huanjin Dharma eye and observed carefully, he would have been able to see the flaws. The key was that Feng Haiyang chose the perfect time to retreat. It happened to be the moment when Jinren Yu broke into the upstanding qi. At that time, the cultivator with the surname Yu finally broke in. Seeing that his opponent was still there, he did not bother to observe and immediately performed the sacrificial ritual of demon sealing. Look! Zhang Yan looked at Feng Haiyang from afar. He seemed to be deep in thought. From this battle, although this person's cultivation was more profound than most of the disciples here, he was not careless when facing an opponent weaker than him. He was also not willing to put himself in danger. It was obvious that he was a very calm and cautious person. Yang Bai saw that the cultivator risked his life. Although he admired him, he did not agree with him. If it was him, he would not do it even if there was a chance to perish together. It was not easy for a cultivator to reach the state of Yuanying. He did not desire to ascend to Tao, but he wanted to enter the state of Grotto Heaven. He would not easily lose his life here. He shook his head. Stepping on a cloud, he stepped out from the side and bowed. He bowed and said, Jinren Feng, I am here to ask for advice. Feng Haiyang returned the gesture politely and said with a smile, Please enlighten me, Sage Yang. The spectators on both sides of the river couldn't help but get excited. Yuanyang sect was different from Huanjin sect. In terms of prestige, they were second only to the Shaoqing, Qinsong, and Yuxiao sections. Their disciples were also outstanding. It was hard to say who would win and who would lose in this battle. Yang Bai's expression was solemn. Feng Haiyang's methods were treacherous and his cultivation was profound. Faced with such a powerful enemy, Yang Bai did not dare to be careless. After bowing, he retreated far away and took out an octagonal sword disc made of gold and copper, which was suspended above his head. The object was about a foot in length and width, and no thicker than a finger. There were patterns of the stars, the sun, and the moon on it, and there were also mysterious crisscrossing trajectories in between. It spun slowly in the sky, buzzing incessantly. The moment it came out, there was a continuous flow of golden qi coming down from the disc. It was extremely sharp, and it cut the demons that got close to it into pieces. He shouted softly and made a gesture to activate the sword disc. Then, he pointed forward. As the treasure spun, thousands of sword gleams exploded. The sky was instantly covered by countless bright gleams. The golden gleams were so bright that people couldn't open their eyes. The sword gleams were formed by the Gung Xan metal qi. At Yang Bai's level of cultivation, he had already refined it. It was condensed, and it was not afraid of the filth of the tribulation water. At this moment, it was released after a long time. When it charged over, it easily cut the demons and cut through the atmosphere. It was simply unstoppable. His attack crossed thousands of feet, and the sword qi made a whistling sound. Its aura was shocking, and it looked like it was going to cut Feng Haiyang into two. Everyone in the gorge was looking at it. Zhang Yan took a closer look and suddenly said, This Shinren Yang hasn't even entered the battle yet, and he has already lost his desire to win. This battle is definitely not going to end well. Zhang Boyan had fought many times with the disciples of the primal Yang sword sect, and had even killed a nascent soul Taoist master from the sect in a small world. Therefore, he knew the ins and outs of this sect very well. Therefore, he agreed with Zhang Boyan's words. He glanced at Yang Bai, sneered, and said, What Manor Head said makes sense. Although this Yang Bai's magical power is pure and refined, he is too focused on self-preservation. There is no way he can defeat martial nephew Feng. The swordsmanship of Yuan Yang's sword sect was based on using the almost endless Gung Xian sword qi to launch continuous attacks. It could suppress the opponent in the whole battlefield and make them unable to breathe. At the same time, it could also ambush the opponent and take advantage of the moment when the opponent was tired and relaxed to launch a sudden attack. Therefore, once the disciples of this sect launched their swordsmanship, they didn't need to defend at all. Yang Bai's attack seemed to be very powerful, but anyone with a discerning eye could see that he didn't have any other moves to follow up. It was obvious that he was very focused on protecting himself. Although it was understandable for him to do so, he had given up his own strength. At the end of the battle, the best result would be a stalemate. Feng Haiyang saw the sword qi approaching him like a hurricane, but he didn't panic. He raised his hand and pointed his finger. A flag rose from the tribulation water and blocked in front of him. There was a demon that kept twisting on the flag. The demon had a horn on its head, and it had hands and feet. Its body was covered with scales, and it had a tail. As soon as it appeared, it opened its mouth and sucked hard, creating a whirlpool. There seemed to be colorful stardust rolling in the whirlpool. When the gold qi came over, it couldn't help but be attracted by the whirlpool. It was sucked into the bottomless stomach of the demon along with the whirlpool. However, as it swallowed more and more sword qi, the black scales of the demonic creature began to turn golden for some reason. Its limbs were originally agile, but in the end, it stopped moving. When the sword qi was gone, there were a few cracking sounds and it broke into countless pieces of gold. They fell from the flag and shattered on the ground. The black flag also turned white. It seemed that the spiritual qi had dissipated. It shook a little and sank back into the tribulation water. At the same time, Feng Haiyang gently waved his sleeve, and a large number of demons surged out from the tribulation water beneath his feet. There were more than 1,000 of them, and after they flew into the air, they spread out in all directions and charged toward Yang Bai while howling. Yang Bai saw that his attack was easily blocked, but he wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to attack again, but when he saw what was happening, his expression changed. He had slashed at these demons dozens of times before, but he only managed to kill 1 or 2 of them. He had some confidence in blocking 100 of them, but if there were more than 1,000 of them, not only would he be suppressed to the point where he couldn't move, but he would also be blocked off from the front and back. When cultivators fought, if one stood in one place and didn't move, they would be courting death. Therefore, he had no choice but to dodge. He immediately turned into a sword light and rushed to another place with his body. While he was flying, he didn't forget to send out more than 100 sword qi. They charged into the group of demons that were chasing after him and broke them into pieces. It took a while for them to reform. However, these demons didn't just charge forward recklessly. Instead, they split into hundreds of groups and attacked from different directions. Because of that, Yang Bai had no choice but to deal with them. After he destroyed one group, there would be another group that didn't fear death. As long as he stayed where he was for a while, groups of demons would gather. It seemed that the more he fought, the more demons would gather. Helplessly, he could only fly away and didn't have time to attack Feng Haiyang anymore. Everyone could see that he was at a disadvantage. But it wasn't because he wasn't strong enough. First, he didn't want to defeat his opponent. Second, the Yuan Yang sect's cultivation methods and divine abilities could only be used when they had the upper hand. His retreat at the beginning meant that he had lost the upper hand. Hu Xian, who was watching the battle from the peak, suddenly shook his head and said, "You don't have the will to fight. Why are you still holding on? Why don't you retreat now?" He could see that although Yang Bai's cultivation wasn't weak, he didn't want to use his full strength. He didn't retreat now because he cared about his face. Zhong Muqing pondered for a while and said, "Since Yang Bai doesn't want to fight for this talisman, if the Yuan Yang sect's disciple wants to go to the extreme heaven, he must get one from me." Currently, there are still 2 talismans in the devil sects that haven't been surrendered. One is the Netherworld Spring sect, and the other is the Hunching sect. He will probably avoid Feng Haiyang and target Hunching sect. Hu Xian thought for a while and said, I will get the one from the Netherworld Spring sect. As for the one from the Hunching sect, let him fight with Zhou Huang. Yang Bai had been entangled by the demons for a long time, but he was a Yuan Yang sect disciple after all. He always had a way to deal with them. He took out a handful of golden qi from his sleeve and threw it. The qi flew very fast. After it was thrown into the air, it immediately spread out and rolled like clouds. It was divided into dozens of balls. The big ones were hundreds of feet long, and the small ones were only a foot long. In a breath's time, they had spread to a radius of 10 miles. Each ball was covered by a golden light and dazzled the eyes. If one were to look up from the ground, they would see that although it was scattered, it had trapped all the demons within it. Yang Bai wanted to use the golden clouds to set up a sword formation. He didn't want to kill them, but only wanted to trap them inside. Only then could he turn around and fight Feng Haiyang. Feng Haiyang smiled playfully. He lightly stepped on the ground, and the tribulation water suddenly surged again. Thousands of demons appeared again, but this time, they didn't drive them out. Instead, they restrained them. He said with a smile, Jinren Yang, since you don't want to fight, why do you need to waste your time here? Yang Bai was embarrassed by his words. Seeing so many demons appearing in front of him, he couldn't help but be shocked. He thought, if I don't use my natal magic sword, it will be hard to defeat this person. But it's not the time to risk my life yet. Why don't I retreat first? Although he had a lot of tricks up his sleeves, to deal with Feng Haiyang, he used the natal killing sword that he had cultivated diligently. As the sword flew, it flashed like lightning. There was no need for it to hit the enemy. As long as it touched the enemy's aura, it would follow the aura and slash. If there was no way to break it, the enemy would definitely be killed. However, if the slash did not hit the enemy, or if it was broken by the enemy, half of the cultivation that he had cultivated would be destroyed. Therefore, although the power of the sword was extraordinary, he didn't dare to attack it recklessly. His Taoist companion, Zhu Xian, also had one. If the two of them used it together, the power of the sword would increase by a few folds. Therefore, to him, it was not worth it to fight Feng Haiyang with his life here. When he reached the highest heaven, there was no such one-on-one rule, then he could fight freely. Thinking about this, he felt that it would be a joke if he continued to fight. Therefore, he kept the sword board and abandoned the talisman. He turned into a sword gleam and returned to the peak. When Feng Haiyang saw him leaving, he calmly waved his sleeves and kept the 3 talismans in the sky. He stepped on the tribulation water and returned to the demonic clouds. Chapter 556. This time, the 4 talismans were used and the outcome was determined within an hour. Feng Haiyang single-handedly defeated Yuan Yang, Huanjin, and Pingdu's sects and took 3 talismans. Xian Men had suffered a huge loss. Ingye Daoren stroked his beard and frowned. His face was full of worry. Suddenly, a letter flew from afar and stopped in front of him. He lifted his eyelids and reached out to grab it. After reading it, he couldn't help but sigh. Before he could put down this letter, another one arrived. He was a little surprised, but he also took it and opened it. However, as his eyes slowly swept over it, his expression changed slightly. He closed his eyes and pondered. After a long time, he stood up. The boy beside him thought that he was going to worship the talisman book and quickly ran to the front to get the incense. Ingye Daoren glanced at him and stopped him. Boy, it's still early, there's no hurry to change the incense. He turned around and greeted the doyen who was sitting nearby. I'm going to talk to senior apprentice brother Lu. The doyen knew that he had something to say and nodded. Junior apprentice brother, please go ahead. Ingye Daoren walked down the altar and walked along a small path to a pavilion behind the peak. He saw a white-bearded Daoren wearing a green and purple Daoist robe with his Daoist hair tied up in a high bun. He closed his eyes and bowed. Senior apprentice brother Lu, the demonic sect has already gotten 6 talismans. It's impossible to kill 1 or 2 of our disciples. I think Xian Men will have to fight one of them at the Jiutian heaven. The elder in the gate slowly opened his eyes and said, "We have to do it at least once. The demonic calamity has lasted for thousands of years, and its luck is flourishing. This is also expected, so there's nothing more to say. Why are you so anxious?" The old Taoist Ingya nodded his head in agreement. He bowed and said, "There is one more thing. The 2 disciples of the Huanjin temple have died. The 3 elders of the sect are going to leave now. However, the 10 sects of Xian men had a discussion earlier on to fight against the enemy together. We have to advance and retreat together, so we can't just ignore it. There should be an explanation." Elder Lu slapped his knee and said, "You are right. Butian Pavilion, Lishan sect, Pingdu sect, Huanjin temple, these 4 sects compared to the other sections. They could be considered small and weak. All of them had lost their talismans. However, since the 10 sects of the Celestial Sect of Wonders had joined forces, the battle with the Devil Sect in the future would be inseparable from them. It was impossible for them to be completely cast aside. According to the previous discussion of the various sect leaders, if the Celestial Sect of Wonders won this time, they would definitely get a share of the Junyang essence. However, no one could say for sure what would happen in the future. Only by working together with the 4 sects could they maintain their strength. Especially the Huanjin temple. Although they had lost 2 of their disciples during the sword fight, it was clear that this sect was determined to exterminate the devil. When fighting against the devil tribulation, they were worthy of being roped in as an ally. Yang Ming had to think of a way to make them stay. Ingya Daoren continued, "Junior martial brother, I will have to use the talisman again later. This time, there are only 6 talisman edicts left. Based on the previous situation, I can only pray once or twice more. Maybe I don't need to wait until nightfall before I can get my hands on them. After that, I will have to go to the extreme heaven to fight. I might as well invite the disciples of the various sects to come to Qingdan Peak. Let's discuss a good strategy to defeat the enemy." Elder Lu stared at him and said, "If that's the case, I don't think Junior Martial Brother will come looking for me. What exactly is the matter? Tell me. There's no need to beat around the bush." Ingya Daoren put his hand into his sleeve and handed over a letter. He said, "Senior Martial Brother, please take a look. This was sent by Zhou Jinren of the Yuxiao School. I don't dare to make a decision alone. I can only ask Senior Martial Brother to make a decision." Elder Lu smiled faintly. After he read the content, his brows were also furrowed. He stroked his beard and seemed to be in deep thought. Ingya Daoren stood below and didn't dare to disturb him. Elder Lu said in a deep voice, "What Zhou Jinren said is actually reasonable. The Yaoyin clan didn't say that they wanted to join forces with the 10 sections. Although they signed the talisman thousands of years ago, no one knows what they are now. We should treat them as outsiders. We have no reason to stop them." Ingya Daoren tried to ask, "Then should I reply to Zhou Jinren with this?" Elder Lu raised his hand and smiled, "No need. Can't you see that he has already made up his mind? Even if you don't reply, he will still make a move. Why do we need to get involved and provoke a strong enemy for no reason? When we send the letter later, don't mention anything about it. Just say that we invited him to the summit for a discussion. Just leave out the Yaoyin clan. He will understand." Ingya Daoren raised his hand and said, "Yes, I understand." After he bid farewell to Elder Lu, he returned to the altar and ordered a child to write a letter to invite the disciples of the various sects to the summit. After a while, more than 10 rays of light flew to the various peaks. Even Guangyuan sect received one. Only the Yaoyin clan was missing. After Elder Shen received the letter, he didn't dare to hesitate. He immediately flew up and arrived in front of Yaoyin Peak. Seeing that there was a formation blocking his way, he bowed and said, "Jinren Zhang, Daoren Shenin Feng is here to pay a visit." Just as he finished speaking, the formation below opened and a clear voice came out, "Elder Shen, please come down for a chat." Elder Shen landed on the cloud and stood firmly on the summit. Seeing Zhang Yan standing on the altar waiting for him, he hurriedly came up and greeted each other. After exchanging greetings and some small talk, he said, "Zhenren Zhang, just now, there is a letter from Qingdan Peak, saying that Daoren is summoned to attend a discussion. I don't dare to make the decision on my own, so I've come to ask Zhenren Zhang, what should I do?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I have already seen it. Elder Shen doesn't need to worry, just act according to your heart." Elder Shen said in a deep voice, "Then Daoren won't be going." Zhang Yan looked at him and smiled, "Fellow Taoist, have you thought about it clearly? This Daoren could be considered to have tricked the 10 sections. If he could go this time, although he couldn't take out the decree, with his means, as long as he gave in, he wouldn't be forced too much in the future. After all, he wouldn't have to destroy Guangyuan's sect just because of this." Elder Shen chuckled and straightened his body, saying, "My Guangyuan sect has been under Nanhua sect for hundreds of years, and I've had enough of it. Since I'm here for the sword battle, I am willing to follow Zhenren Zhang to extreme heaven." These words were openly declaring that he was willing to stand on Yaoyin's side. Zhang Yan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The battle at extreme heaven was extremely dangerous, it was a real battle of life and death. He had an agreement with Elder Shen before, if something happened to this Daoren, then no one would help him. Seeing his expression, Elder Shen cupped his hands and said seriously, "Zhenren Zhang, you don't need to worry." This time, Daoren came with the golden axis talisman given by the sect leader. This talisman was made by the founder of Guangyuan sect, and it also has the help of founder Shinchong. If he were to encounter any danger, he would be able to escape without any loss. On the contrary, it can even help fellow Taoist. Zhang Yan was a little surprised, he didn't expect this old man to be so courageous. He nodded and laughed loudly, "All right, if fellow Taoist wants to go, I won't stop you. When the time comes, it'll be up to fate and fate." On the altar of Yuxiao School, 3 Zhenren Yuanying who came for the sword battle were sitting on the praying mats. Zhou Huang sat in the middle, and behind him, on his left and right, were Zhou Qingju and Xia Keming. They were both meditating with their eyes closed. At this moment, a letter flew over. Zhou Huang sensed it and immediately took it. He opened the cover and glanced at it. The letter only said that he was invited to attend a meeting, but it didn't mention a word about the Yaoyin clan. He thought for a while and knew what was going on. He scoffed and said, "If that's the case, why invite me?" With a flip of his palm, a ray of light shot out and the letter disappeared. Zhou Qingju's limpid eyes turned towards him and said, "Shixiang, is it because Elder Ying is unwilling to speak clearly?" Zhou Huang laughed coldly, "Ignore him. When did my Yuxiao school need other people's permission to do things? Sending a letter is out of etiquette. Seeing that we are both from the Xianmen lineage, I'll just let him know." Zhou Qingju nodded lightly. Zhou Huang said in a low voice, "Qingju, when the talisman is sent from my peak, I will guard this place. You go and get the talisman from Yaoyin clan." Zhou Qingju stood up and bent her knees, "Yes, junior sister." Zhou Huang turned to Xia Ku and said, "There are only 2 talismans left from the Devil sect, one from the Netherworld sect and the other from the Hunqing sect. Just now, Spiritual Master Hua has sent a letter saying that he wants to meet with Feng Haiyang. We don't need to fight with Qinsang school. That Lemukyu from the Hunqing sect is not strong enough and is not worth my time. You will get the talisman. If there is a chance, you can try to get rid of him." Xia Keming immediately stood up and bowed, "I will not disappoint senior brother," but, at this point, he looked hesitant. Zhou Huang frowned and said, "Just say it." Xia Keming cupped his hands and said, "Other sects will not dare to fight with us for the talisman from the Hunqing sect. Only Yuanyang sect has to worry about it. Yang Bai and Zhu Exan lost the talisman from our sect. If they also want this talisman, what should I do? Senior brother, please tell me." 200 years ago, Yuanyang sect had another spiritual master who achieved the Grotto Heaven realm. Recently, they had also produced many excellent disciples. They looked like they were going to become one of the 4 major sects of Donghua. Although Yang Bai and Zhu Xian were the best of their generation, their cultivation was not the highest. It was only because they were cultivation companions that they were sent here to fight with swords. This also showed that Yuan Yang's sect had set their sights on the ultimate heaven and would not give up on this talisman. Zhou Huang's eyes turned cold and said, "You don't have to worry. So what if you are from Yuan Yang's sect? Just do what you want." With Zhou Huang's permission, Xia Keming felt more at ease. As for the possibility of going against Yang Bai, he was not afraid. But thinking about this, he could not help but look at Zhou Qingju with a concerned expression. He said softly, that Zhang Yan's mana is strong and his Dao techniques are strange. He is also good at killing with flying swords. Senior sister, you need to be careful. Zhou Qingju said softly, "Thank you for reminding me. I will be careful." Xia Keming was instantly relieved. His senior sister had cultivated for more than 300 years. As long as she did not underestimate her opponent, she would be fine. An hour later, Daoran Ingya and the other sects finished their discussion. After sending everyone off, he came out and went to the altar. He first called the boy over to change the incense and candles. His expression was solemn as he stood in the mountain wind for a while. Then, he bowed deeply to the talisman. After resting for a while, a deafening sound of thunder suddenly came from the high cloud. It was like the beating of a heavenly drum, shaking mountains and collapsing mountains. His expression changed. Hearing this sound, he knew that it was different this time. Looking up, he saw the high cloud void chi, as if it was receiving an order, slowly spread out. In an instant, a golden light covered the ground. The wind blew and the clouds warmed the grass and trees. In an instant, among the golden clouds, 6 rays of light shot down. Chapter 557. The last 6 talismans did not fall at the same time after they left the high cloud. Instead, each talisman pointed at a mountain peak from afar. The light rippled and floated in the air. Such a strange situation made all the cultivators in the gorge not dare to act rashly. They only watched attentively. After a while, one of the talismans suddenly shook as if it was tied to a stone. It suddenly fell towards the peak of Qinsang School. After the talisman decree appeared, Huxian stood high above the altar and stared at the sky without blinking. When he saw this scene, he turned his head and said in a low voice, "Junior brother Zhong, I'll leave it to you to retrieve this talisman decree." Zhong Muqing's expression was solemn. He raised his hand and cupped his fist. He released the high wind and flew up to the sky. Huxian was not worried about him. Zhong Muqing had cultivated for more than 400 years. He was once a disciple of Meng Zhen with Qi Yuntian. Not only did he have a strong foundation, but he was also diligently practicing one of the 12 supernatural powers of Qinsang School, the 2 images transforming heart. Normal Yuanying cultivators could not be his match. Only cultivators like Feng Haiyang, who were in the 2nd level of Yuanying, would have to be careful. However, this person still had to take care of the talisman from Qinsang School, so he could not leave for now. Just as he thought of this, he saw another talisman falling from the cloud among the remaining 5 talismans. It floated with the wind and pointed at the peak of Qinsang School. He turned his head and said, "Junior Luo, I'll go and get this talisman." Luo Qingyu cupped his fist and said, "Senior Hua, don't be careless." Huxian nodded and took a step forward. With a leap, he turned into a flame that swept across the sky. With a shocking momentum, he went straight to the peak of Qinsang School. Feng Haiyang was already waiting for Huxian at the peak. He smiled and said to his fellow cultivators, "I've long heard that Huxian is the top of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang School. His supernatural powers are not much weaker than Qi Yintian's. I'll go and meet him later." After he finished speaking, he stepped on the long smoke and flew into the sky. He had no intention to compete with Huxian. The Devil sect had already obtained 6 talismans, so there was no need for them to compete. Although one more talisman decree would mean one more wisp of Jun Yang's spiritual essence. However, he could try to snatch it after he reached the extreme heaven realm. Now, he just wanted to test Huoxian's strength and see if he lived up to his name. When he reached the depths of the clouds, he unleashed the myriad spirits' calamity water. It looked like a black dragon spiraling under his feet, occupying half of the sky. Huoxian saw this scene. Without uttering a single word, he shook his body, and the astral clouds above his head suddenly revolved. A blazing and dazzling brilliance descended like a blazing sun in the sky, blazing like a raging inferno. The oppressive heat waves rolled over. Even the cultivators standing on the mountain ridges by the river felt their eyebrows burning, their hair burning, and their mouths parched. The heat was unbearable. He cultivated both the scarlet firmament lucky jadeite book and the treasure gold cloud inscription at the same time, so after the gold and fire chi rose up, thousands of golden lights flashed continuously, occupying half of the sky. They were thousands of feet away from Feng Haiyang as they confronted each other. Apart from Zhang Yan, this was the first time the disciples of the three major sects of Xianmen faced off against the disciples of the Devil sect. Everyone was instantly attracted. Feng Haiyang didn't look at the talisman. He bowed to Huoxian and then shook his shoulders. Hundreds of demons leaped out of the tribulation water one after another. Their roars shook the heavens. They were densely packed and gathered in one place. Huoxian was calm, but he was full of fighting spirit. His face didn't change at all. He opened his arms, and the flames turned into flames. Golden fire gushed out, and the hundreds of demons were engulfed. Not even ashes were left. Feng Haiyang didn't continue to attack. He bowed and returned to the clouds. Huoxian bowed back, shook his sleeves, and returned to the peak. Just as the two of them were exchanging blows, two more decrees fell down. One headed towards the Hunqing sect while the other headed towards the Taihao sect. Yang Bai stood at the top of the mountain and looked into the distance. His clothes fluttered, but he didn't take the talisman. Zhu Exan walked behind him and said worriedly, "Senior Marshal Brother, aren't you going to take the talisman from Hunqing sect?" Yang Bai shook his head and said, "Since Zhenren Hu of Qinsang School went to take the talisman from Nether Spring sect, Zhenren Zhou won't let go of the talisman from Hunqing sect. Why should I fight with him?" As soon as he finished speaking, a bright rainbow light flew out from the peak of Yuxiao School and went to Hunqing sect. Zhu Xian's expression changed. She stomped her feet and said, "Senior Marshal Brother, you don't even want to fight for it. If I knew this would happen, I would have gone to take it. Now that I'm giving it to someone else, how can Yuan Yang sect go to Jiutian heaven?" Seeing that she was unhappy, Yang Bai quickly held her hand and said gently, "Junior Marshal Sister, don't worry. Your husband has a way. Look at this." He opened his palm and revealed a purple jade-like seed. Zhu Exan looked at it and couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. She stared at her husband and said, "Purple sun seed? Senior Marshal Brother, where did you get this?" Yang Bai laughed and said, "Junior Marshal Sister, with this in hand, if I take it to Taihao School, do you think I won't be able to exchange it for a talisman?" The violet jade sun seed was a precious seed produced by the sect guarding divine tree of the Supreme Sky sect. It was of great importance to the Supreme Sky sect. However, several of these seeds had been lost over the past several thousand years. If this one could be returned, the Supreme Sky sect would definitely not reject it. Zhu Exan thought to herself, no wonder Senior Marshal Brother was so depressed. So this is the reason. At this moment, she thought again and frowned, "Senior Marshal Brother, how do you know that Taihao School has an extra talisman to give to Primordial Yang School?" Yang Bai smiled mysteriously and said, "Of course I don't. Did Junior Marshal Sister think that this is the only thing I prepared?" He took out a crystal clear sword pellet and held it in his palm. He said, "Junior Marshal Sister, I believe you also recognize the origin of this item." Zhu Xian's eyes widened and she was even more shocked. She naturally recognized this item. Back then, Primordial Yang School's Reverend Hong Yu defeated Shaoqing School's disciple Zhao Shu in the competition and obtained this sword pellet. After this Reverend ascended, This item was placed in the ancestral hall. Yang Bai smiled proudly and said, in terms of seniority, this Reverend Xiao Shu happens to be in the same generation as the current Shaoqing School's Reverend Senior Martial Uncle. Also, this sword pellet seems to have other mysteries. If we return this item to Shaoqing School, we can most likely ask Reverend Sun to help us. Even if we exchange it for a talisman, it should be possible. Zhu Exayan looked at Yang Bai with a complicated expression and said faintly, so the sect has already made arrangements. Senior Martial Brother, you really hid it from me. Yang Bai sighed softly and shook her hand. He said apologetically, it's not that I wanted to hide it from you, but this matter is of great importance. The Reverend Senior Martial Uncle told me that even if it's someone close to me, I can't say a word about it. Please don't blame me, Junior Martial Sister. The elders of Primordial Yang School did not approve of the practice of wasting the disciples' mana before the extreme heaven sword duel. They thought that it was not necessary to fight with one's life to obtain the talisman. They could totally use other methods to achieve it in private. Therefore, Yang Bai brought a total of 3 items with him. One was this sword pellet, another was the Jade Jasper Purple Sun Seed. As for the last item, it was related to Nanhua sect. However, it was not of any use now. When Tong Yingyuan of Taihao School saw his sect's talisman descending, he immediately used his escape technique and flew up. He thought that he would have a good fight, but after waiting for a while, no one from Devil's sect came to pay attention to him. Therefore, he easily obtained the talisman. During the sword duel, he had only fought twice, and he had already obtained 2 talismans. He was very happy. At this moment, he saw a flying letter flying in the air. He didn't pay much attention to it, and just casually glanced at it. However, his eyes were staring at it, as if he couldn't believe it. After a while, he came back to his senses. He waved his hand and shot out a thunder fire, burning the flying letter into ashes. He thought to himself, the Jade Jasper Purple Sun Seed is an important treasure of my sect. If what Yang Bai said is true, I must get it back. Also, if I can get another one, I will have a better chance of winning when I go to the Extreme Heaven Sword Duel. He was not an ordinary person in Taihao School. His master was the disciple of the sect head, so there was no need for him to follow them. After making up his mind, he immediately turned around and flew towards Yuanyang sect. At this moment, on a lush mountain ridge in Chengyuan Gorge, Luo Canghai and the other 2 were hiding, as if they were waiting for an opportunity to strike. Luo Canghai's gaze occasionally swept back and forth between Yaoyin Peak and the few talismans in the sky. At this moment, an inconspicuous green light flew over and landed in front of them. A skinny Taoist appeared and bowed, saying, Senior Martial Brother Luo, I'm here under orders and will listen to your orders. Luo Canghai looked at him and said, You're Taoist Cheng. I heard from eldest senior brother that you're trustworthy. If you can help me get the talisman this time, I'll talk to my master and accept you as a disciple in name. The skinny Taoist was overjoyed and said, Then I'll leave it to you, senior brother. Wu Huanchen thought to himself, so he has someone else here. Come to think of it, why would he trust us so easily? Luo Canghai turned around and said to Wu Huanchen, Wait for the talisman to be sent to the Yaoyin clan later. Try to guard against the other 2 Yuanying Taoists who came with Zhang Yan, especially that dragon carp. We mustn't let that demon come over. Wu Huanchen originally thought that Luo Canghai would ask them to attack Zhang Yan together, but he did not expect them to only be there to hold him back. This was very surprising. Not only him, Qin Yangzi also thought the same. However, when they heard that they were going to stop the dragon carp, the 2 of them looked troubled. Wu Huanchen cupped his hands and said, Brother Luo, that dragon carp is very famous in the Eastern Sea. Its cultivation is not inferior to a Yuanying 3rd-layer cultivator, and its power is monstrous. It only takes a moment to crush the 2 of us, so how can we stop it? Luo Canghai laughed out loud and said, Of course I won't send you to your deaths. He reached into his sleeve and took out an item. He pointed at it and said, This is the mysterious glow lamp, it can protect you. Wu Huanchen quickly reached out and caught the item. He placed it in front of his eyes and looked at it carefully. It was a simple and unadorned lamp stand. The handle was like a tree root, and it was twisted and knotted. The Big Dipper was carved on it, and there were also cloud patterns and ancient seal scripts. It looked mysterious and profound. A surge of spiritual chi was released from the lamp, and Wu Huanchen could tell that it was a profound weapon the moment he touched it. He let out a sigh of relief and kept the treasure. He thought to himself, with this item and my treasured umbrella, I can still retreat in time if the situation is bad. As he was thinking, he suddenly heard a clap of thunder in the sky. When he turned around, he saw the two talismans at the top suddenly sink and shot down from the clouds. One was in the south and the other in the north, and they landed on both sides of the river. Chapter 558. The two talismans each had their own destination. One was heading towards the Yuxiao school, while the other was flying towards the Yaoyin peak. Luo Canghai, who was hiding at the side, became excited. The opportunity he had been waiting for was finally here. A burning light shot out from his eyes as he shouted, "Everyone, follow me." Before he finished speaking, he had already activated his escape light and flew close to the ground. He turned into an arc of light and rushed towards the peak of the Yaoyin clan. Wu Huanchen and Qin Yangzi also flew out together. However, their goal was to stop Dragon Carp, Zhang Nyangzi, and Sun Yangzi from helping Zhang Yan. Hence, they were a step behind and did not overtake the main focus. When the skinny Taoist heard the order, he did not hesitate at all. He leaped forward from the mountain ridge and flew into the sky. The escape technique he executed was extremely brilliant. His figure swayed slightly, and in the blink of an eye, he'd already passed Luo Canghai's group of three. Although he'd started later, he'd already appeared above the clouds. Then, he leaped up and headed straight for the decree. No matter how confident Luo Canghai was, he did not think that he could take down Zhang Yan in a short amount of time. Hence, his plan was to stall Zhang Yan while the skinny Taoist took the talisman and left. In the demonic clouds in the sky, the disciples of the 6 great demon sects were no longer preparing to make a move. However, when they saw such a situation, they could not help but look over. When Sun Yangzi saw that the person who came to take the talisman was not a disciple of the two Taoist, she raised her eyebrows in dissatisfaction. She immediately raised her hand and drew her bow. With a buzz, the bowstring vibrated and a red light shot down. The skinny Taoist had been warned beforehand and had been on guard against the disciples of the demon sects. When he saw this, he snorted and curled up his body. Not only did he dodge the flying arrow, he even leaped up a bit. Sun Yangzi was surprised and shot a few more arrows. However, the skinny Taoist still managed to dodge them easily. After a few times, he was not far from the talisman. The skinny Taoist's cultivation was mediocre. That was why Lu Junyang had recommended him to help Luo Canghai. At this moment, he saw that the decree was within his reach. Just as he was about to stretch out his hand, he abruptly turned his head as if he had sensed something. A streak of starlight almost brushed past his cheek as it flew past. Just a step away from taking his life. Unconsciously, he broke out in a cold sweat and hurriedly curled up his body before explosively retreating 1,000 feet. He steadied himself. When he looked carefully, he saw a ray of light coming from the south, like a meteor. When it came close, the light disappeared. A woman with a temperament like an orchid in an empty valley strolled out. He couldn't help but shiver and exclaimed in a low voice, "Yuxiao school." Zhou Qinyun glanced over and frowned slightly. She was here to seize the decree on the surface, but she was secretly here to deal with Zhang Yan. But now that he was here, he didn't do anything. He thought to himself, could it be that Zhang Yan has 2 talismans in his hands and has no intention of snatching them? The more she thought about it, the more she felt that it was possible. Seeing the skinny Taoist looking at her in shock and doubt, she felt annoyed. She rolled up her sleeves and raised her slender hand, pointing in that direction. The ball of sparkling Big Dipper above her flashed slightly. 7 spots of starlight floated out and arranged themselves in order. It was like a bright chain of stars flew out. The skinny Taoist's body shuddered, fear appearing on his face as he cried out, "Divine might star thunder bead?" At first, the starlight was still 1,000 feet away, but in the blink of an eye, it was already in front of him. He gave out a weird cry and wanted to dodge using his good escape technique. But the 7 bolts of star thunder came one after another. They were extremely fast and kept exploding in the void. Even if they didn't really touch him, just being touched by the shockwave caused his escape light to waver. He spat out blood continuously and was on the verge of collapsing. Luo Canghai circled around the Yaoyin clan's peak and saw Zhang Yan sitting firmly on the spell altar with no intention of getting up. He was surprised when he heard movement behind him. He turned around and couldn't help but be shocked and furious. Why is Yuxiao school interfering? He had thought that there would be demon sect disciples coming, so he kept his guard up. He didn't expect that as a Xianmen sect, Yuxiao school would also come to snatch the talisman. The skinny Taoist was a crucial person. It was related to whether or not he could successfully snatch the talisman. Before he succeeded, he had to protect him. He hurriedly released a banner. After it flew out, it fluttered in the wind and protected the skinny Taoist. Fortunately, he acted in time and rushed forward. The skinny Taoist was not killed by the thunder bead. Luo Canghai looked at Zhou Qingyun with an unfriendly gaze. Now that Zhang Yan couldn't hide in the formation, this woman became his biggest opponent. He instructed Wu Huanchen and Qin Yangzi to keep an eye on the peak to prevent Zhang Yan from coming out. He then rolled up a cloud of smoke and went to the sky. He stood in front of Zhou Qingyun and stared at her. But both of them could tell that the other party was not an ordinary person. They were also worried, so none of them wanted to make the first move. The skinny Taoist saw that no one was going to stop him and knew that his chance had come. He came out from the banner and leaped towards the talisman. Zhang Boyan and Priest Su saw that Luo Canghai had left and felt that their chance had come. Zhang Boyan looked at Wu and Qin Yangzi and said softly, "Manner Master, why don't Taoist Su and I deal with these two first?" However, Zhang Yan waved his hand to stop him and smiled. "No need. Watch me." He slowly stood up. As he straightened his body, a vast and mighty gale immediately spread out from the mountain peak. The leaves rustled and the rocks and sand on the mountain peak rustled as they fell. He raised his head to the sky and let out a long roar. The astral cloud above his head trembled, and with a boom, it shot up into the sky. When it reached the top of the sky, it stopped, and then flipped and stretched again. Before long, it turned into a cloud that was thousands of feet tall. Originally, it was surrounded by 5 colors, but now, it was filled with purple gas. One could faintly see lightning snakes dancing within it. Lightning bolts surged, faintly emitting rumbling sounds. This commotion was extremely like the arrival of the heavens, causing all the cultivators in the canyon to raise their heads to look over. Many of them saw that it was Zhang Yan who was executing a technique, and they couldn't help but recall the shocking hand from before, causing their faces to turn pale. Zhou Huang had already taken the talisman and returned to the peak. He suddenly turned around and his gaze froze. He said in surprise, "Purple cloud heavenly lightning?" Luo Canghai's expression was stern. He was the disciple of Fierce, so he naturally recognized this technique. Now that such a strange phenomenon appeared, this attack must have been prepared for a long time. If it fell, it would be earth-shattering and it couldn't be easily blocked. In a second, his heart sank. No wonder Zhang Yan was sitting on the peak. It wasn't that he didn't want to fight, but he wanted to get rid of everyone. He wasn't a member of the Xian Gate or the Devil Sect, so he couldn't stay here for long. If he retreated now and wanted to take back the talisman, then the chances of him seizing the talisman would be slim. Thinking of this, a ferocious expression appeared on his face. The more it was like this, the more he couldn't let Yi Xian use this technique as he wished. He had to stop Yi Xian while he was distracted. He let out a wild shout and waved his sleeve, shooting out a silvery flying shuttle. It was only halfway there when he heard a dragon roar and it transformed into a mighty green dragon. Auspicious clouds curled around its feet as it soared into the sky. Its long and slender body shook off the wind and smoke as it headed straight for the summit. The 3 disciples of Qinsang's school were surprised when they saw this scene. Hu Xian turned around and said to Luo Qingyu and Zhong Muqing, "Is this our Qinsang school's 4 symbols heavenly shuttle technique?" Although Luo Qingyu did not usually speak much, his reaction at this moment was the most intense. His eyes suddenly became sharp and he cupped his hands together and said, "2 senior brothers, this person must be the disciple of that villain. Since we are disciples of the Dark Azure sect, we must kill this villain." Hu Xian pressed on his shoulder and said in a deep voice, "Junior brother, don't be impatient. With junior brother Zhang's remarkable Taoist techniques, he can handle this person. We just need to prevent him from escaping. You and junior brother Zhong go and guard the entrance of the canyon first, then we won't have to worry about him escaping." Luo Qingyu understood and nodded. The peaks on both sides of Chengyuan Gorge were protected by the prohibition, so they didn't have to worry about him flying over. As long as the entrance of the gorge was guarded, this person would be like a turtle in a jar. The 3 of them discussed for a while more, then Luo and Zhong flew down from the peak and disappeared in a moment. Zhang Yan saw the green dragon rushing over, but he smiled slightly. A light flashed on top of his head and the Qiankuan leaf flew out. It was soft like a floating leaf and golden light shone in all directions. This treasure had been refined by him for a long time, and it had long become one with his mind and spirit. It was unlike when he first got it, when he could not use it as he wished. Amidst the dragon's roar, the azure dragon charged down with a mountain-shattering sound. A loud bang rang out. Although the heaven and earth leaf was hit so hard that stars shot out in all directions and it shook endlessly, it still stood firmly in place and did not move back even a bit. Zhang Yan's body did not move, but the sword will in his heart rose. From under the Qiankuan leaf, a cold sword ray swept out and killed in midair. Luo Canghai was about to dodge, but suddenly his body froze, as if his body was being strangled by someone. His expression changed. How could he not know that the dragon carp was trapped in this part of the world? He cursed in his heart. This technique was so fast that it was not a spontaneous idea. It was obvious that Zhang Yan had prepared for it. However, the situation was critical, and he had no time to think about it. He hurriedly took out 4 dazzling sky shuttles to protect himself. The 4 flying shuttles had just entered the sky when the figures of 4 divine beasts appeared. With a flash, the sword ray that was rushing at him disappeared. At this moment, Wu Huanchen and Qin Yangzi also felt like they were trapped in a swamp. It was difficult for them to move, and they knew that they could not escape. They could only take out their protective treasures. Both of them looked at the thunder clouds circling in the void and were anxious. Zhou Qingyun also felt like her body was tied up. She shouted softly, and a crystal jade pearl emerged from the high cloud above her. A bright starlight shone down and protected her body. Then, she waved her hand, and when Luo Canghai was unprepared, she took the decree into her hand. Zhang Yan did not pay attention to her, and only focused on activating his mana. After a while, the high cloud seemed to have accumulated to its peak. With a loud shout, he suddenly released his magic power. In an instant, lightning flashed between heaven and earth, and there seemed to be a flash of dazzling light. Hundreds of purple thunderbolts struck down from the high cloud, and it was as if the world was collapsing. The mountains in the gorge trembled, and the rivers surged. Those with shallow cultivation were already shocked to the point that they covered their ears and fell to the ground. Under the bombardment of the thunderbolts, the skinny Taoist was the first to be unable to withstand it. With a cry, he was struck into ashes along with his banner. Wu Huanchen was shocked, and he hurriedly took out the profound glow lamp and released a gray fog to cover his body. The treasure could have protected the 2 of them, and he only had time to care for himself in his fear. Qin Yangzi was not far from him, and she wanted to be protected, but she was a step too late. She was blocked outside, and her face showed a shocked expression. When Wu Huanchen realized that something was wrong, he wanted to save himself, but he saw a flash of light in front of him. He endured the pain and looked, and saw that Qi Nyangzi had been struck by dozens of thunderbolts. In an instant, not even her bones were left. His heart felt like it was being grabbed, and he trembled. Only then did the sound of thunder enter his ears. P.S. An elder has a cyst in his throat. Accompany him to the district hospital for a drip. There's one more chapter, and I'll fill it up tomorrow. Chapter 559. In the Chengyuan Gorge, thunder and lightning flashed like dragons and snakes. They coiled around and rumbled, causing the mountains to tremble and the heavens and earth to tremble. The cultivators of the 10 schools and 6 sects, as well as the mystical demonic sect, were all taken aback. Under such divine power, it would be difficult for anyone to escape unscathed if they did not have a supreme treasure to protect themselves. Zhang Yan's thunder technique this time was not a random one. He had deliberately guided it, and most of it was focused on Luo Canghai. Luo Canghai was quite impressive. Although he was restrained by the dragon carp and couldn't rush out of this place, he had the 4 Division Sky Shuttle to protect him. He flew around and blocked the lightning bolts, so he was able to hold his ground. All the lightning bolts were blocked 100 feet away. Although it wasn't too strenuous for him to deal with it, it was only limited to protecting himself. 2 of the 3 nascent soul cultivators who came with him had already lost their lives in an instant. Now, only Wu Huanchen was left, and he was still holding on bitterly. As for Zhou Qingyun, who was also trapped in the seal, Zhang Yan did not pay attention to her for now. He was currently borrowing the power of the dragon carp's Renren to seal the heaven and earth. If he attacked the woman, it would inevitably attract the intervention of the Yuxiao school's elders. Thus, he only trapped her in the air and did not let her escape. He would only fight her after he dealt with Luo Canghai. Wu Huanchen wasn't having a good time at the moment. The might of the purple cloud godly thunder was immense. Normally, he would only need to take a hit from such a Taoist technique to shatter his protective treasure light. Now that he was being attacked in succession, even with the protection of the profound lantern that Luo Canghai had bestowed upon him, he was feeling strained. Every time a thunderbolt fell and hit the mist on the lamp, the mist would disperse a little. After a few times, it seemed to be dissipating. In order to try to hold it together, he poured all his mana into it, hoping that he could endure it. This violent thunderbolt bombardment. Although it looked magnificent, it only lasted for a dozen breaths. When everyone reacted, the sound had already died down. Zhang Yan was about to stop when he suddenly sensed something. He looked around and saw 2 familiar streaks of light heading toward the entrance of the canyon. His heart stirred and he thought for a moment. With a slight smile, he let out a shout and circulated his Xian Qi again. The purple cloud above his head rumbled and shook. Immediately, hundreds of purple lightning bolts struck down from the cloud. Luo Canghai saw that Zhang Yan was attacking without hesitation. He was also shocked and angry, but he calmly judged in his heart, for Zhang Yan to act like this, even if his Dan is of the 1st grade, he must have used up a lot of his Fa Li. When he stops, I can attack and kill him. However, as soon as he thought of this, he thought of something else. Cursing inwardly, he dispelled the thought. Zhang Yan was not alone this time. There were 2 Daoist Zhang and Daoist Su guarding him, so he could not find a suitable opportunity to strike. Luo Canghai looked away. He circled around Zhou Qingyun's body. His goal had been to seize the decree, but it had now fallen into the hands of this woman. To snatch the decree from this Yuxiao school disciple was not something that could be done in a short amount of time. He couldn't stay here for long. If he didn't leave now, if he did not leave, it would be difficult for him to escape. He was a decisive person. He felt that things could not be done, so he did not force it. He took out a life-saving talisman and held it in his hand, waiting for an opportunity. This talisman was given to him by his first senior brother, Lu Junyang, before he left. It was enough to safely send him away. He relied on this item to dare to enter Chengyuan Gorge to snatch the decree. Actually, he was not without resentment. He wanted to borrow a true artifact to protect himself, but no matter how much he begged, Lu Junyang was not willing to lend it to him. If he could really bring it here, he would have already snatched the decree. At this time, the purple cloud divine lightning was still crashing down. Luo Canghai did not feel much, but Wu Huanchen on the other side could not take it anymore. This eastern sea cultivator saw that the gray mist on the lamp was becoming thinner and thinner, and he knew that if this continued, he would die a graveless death in a short moment at most, and he would suffer the same fate as Qin Yangzi. He couldn't help but feel resentful in his heart, and he cursed in his heart. If it wasn't for this Luo Canghai, this hall master would have escaped long ago, and how would I fall into such a situation? Thinking of this, his eyes flashed fiercely. He suddenly thought of an idea that might save his life. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well give it a try. He gritted his teeth and pretended to be unable to take it anymore. After a few steps, he retreated close to Luo Canghai. He secretly took out the mountain-quaking golden rod and looked for an opportunity. He raised his arm and smashed it towards Luo Canghai. At the same time, he shouted, "Luo Canghai, die!" If it was a sneak attack, he would not make a sound. However, he purposely shouted for Zhang Yan to hear to show his stance. Although Luo Canghai saw Wu Huanchen approaching, he really did not expect him to change sides at the last minute. He was originally thinking of when to escape. The Four Guardian Sky Shuttle was blocking the purple cloud divine lightning in the sky, and a small part of his attention was on Zhou Qingyun. Wu Huanchen was not in his consideration at all, so he was not on guard at all. Wu Huanchen was afraid that Zhang Yan would think that he was acting when he swung his rod down, so he used almost all of his strength. He was extremely ruthless. Not only did it break Luo Canghai's protective light, it even landed on him. However, what surprised him was that the rod did not seem to have taken the brunt of the force. It actually slid past Luo Canghai's back. Luo Canghai staggered forward and felt a tightness in his chest. He knew that the situation was bad, but he had no time to bother with Wu Huanchen. He pinched the talisman in his hand, and a fiery glow soared in an instant, enveloping his entire body. He rolled up his sleeve and brought the Four Guardian Sky Shuttle back. With another leap, he turned into a stream of starfire and flew away. With a loud bang, he actually broke out of this part of the world. When he was outside, he took the time to look down and saw that the talisman was already half burnt. He glared at Wu Huanchen hatefully and wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth. Without hesitation, he activated his mana and flew towards the mouth of the ravine. Zhang Yan smiled. He had already seen Luo and Zhong obstructing him at the mouth of the ravine. He knew that he could not escape, so he did not chase after him. Luo Canghai's conveyance light was as fast as lightning. It was actually not much slower than Zhang Yan's sword escape with all his might. He should have been able to get out of the ravine in an instant, but when he saw that there seemed to be two people blocking his way at the mouth of the ravine, he could not help but sneer coldly. He was about to release the Four Guardian Sky Shuttle to break his way out, but when he saw the appearance of the two people clearly, his expression changed. The person on the left was covered in a green Taoist robe. He looked like a cool breeze and bright moon, elegant and refined. The person on the right was a handsome scholar. His white robe fluttered in the wind, making him look like an immortal. They were obviously Luo Qingyu and Zhong Muqing. These two people were not ordinary cultivators. It was already difficult to deal with one person, let alone two people in front of him. Just as he was thinking of a countermeasure, there was suddenly a burst of flame behind him. When he turned to look, he saw a ball of blazing fire in the sky. It was scorching hot, and he could not help but narrow his eyes. It was actually Huxian who had arrived behind him. But in a flash, he was already surrounded by the three great disciples of Qinsang school. Luo Canghai's eyes flickered. He looked at the three people one by one, and suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. He said, "What ability do I have to actually make three senior brothers attack me together?" Huxian was expressionless. He said in a deep voice, "That person has long since betrayed the sect. You are his disciple, and you are not a disciple of Qinsang school. Don't mention the title of senior brother again. Today, with the three of us here, you can no longer escape. If you surrender, we will not take your life, and will only hand you over to the masters of the sect. Luo Canghai was also clear that it was impossible for him to go against these three people. Hatred arose in his heart. He sneered and said, "Let me see how much time you have to waste with me." He suddenly fell down, and actually fell into the river. The expressions of the three people did not change, and they did not stop him. There was also a restrictive spell under the water, and it was a waste of effort to go over with the conveyance technique. Before Luo Canghai landed on the surface of the river, he saw water splashing, and a white python sprang out. He stepped on the top of the python and stood firmly. He let out a long roar, stretched out his hand, and sent the 4 heavenly shuttles into the sky, flying to the 4 corners. He pinched the incantation gesture, and the 4 shuttles vibrated at the same time, each emitting a ray of light. From the 4 directions of the north, south, east, and west, the images of the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise appeared. With the help of the 4 shuttles, a formation was set up in an instant. At this time, the talisman in his arms burned to the end, and completely turned into ashes. With a whoosh, it flew with the wind, and even the protective flame disappeared. Zhong Muqing took a few glances, and his expression became serious. He said, "This is a little troublesome. It is not difficult to break this formation, but it will take 3 to 4 days." Luo Qingyu also frowned. The 4 heavenly shuttles were originally 1, and all of them were first-class Xian weapons. At this moment, the restrictive spell was set up, and it was not much weaker than the mountain guarding formation. It was impossible to break it in a short time. After the talismans were sent to their respective places, the 3 of them would go to the extreme heaven after adjusting their breathing, so how would they have the time to waste here? Luo Canghai must have seen through this, and so he set up this formation on purpose. Hu Xian pondered for a while, and said, "Senior brothers, don't worry, I have a way to break the formation, but I will need junior brother Zhang's help." After Luo Canghai escaped, Zhang Yan retracted his mana, and in an instant, the thunder and lightning disappeared. The high clouds slowly retracted, and it was still hanging on top of the sky. At the same time, he sent an order to Shi Ren to remove the heaven and earth imprisonment technique. Wu Huanchen only felt his body loosening, as if the force that bound him was gone. Because he was defending against the divine thunder, he was also weak at the moment. He fell from the cloud, and landed in front of Zhang Yan. He struggled to get up, and bowed to thank him. "Thank you for not killing me, Jinren Zhang." At this moment, 2 streaks of light came from afar, and they stopped in front of him. It was Ingye Daoren and the elder from his sect. Ingye Daoren took a step forward, and he cupped his hands. "Jinren Zhang, this person snatched the talisman twice during the competition between our sections. His crime is unforgivable, so please hand this person over to me to deal with." Zhang Yan returned the greeting, and he nodded. "Of course." When Wu Huanchen heard this, he immediately panicked, and he said, "Jinren Zhang, I'm still helping you just now." Zhang Yan smiled, and he turned around, ignoring him. That heaven-mending pavilion elder walked out expressionlessly. He stood on top of the cloud and released a jet-black iron chain from his sleeve. With a hua-la sound, it firmly tied Wu Huanchen up. Soon after, he bowed towards Zhang Yan with a Dao salute. He rode the wind and flew up the mountain while dragging Wu Huanchen. Zhang Yan shook his sleeve, and he also flew into the sky. When he arrived in front of Zhou Qingyun, he cupped his hands and said, "Since Lady Zhou is here to take the talisman, let's fight according to the rules of the assembly." Chapter 560. Zhou Qingyun was instructed by Zhou Huang to come to Yaoyin Peak. Stealing the talisman was just an excuse, so after escaping from the dragon carp's trapping technique, she still stood there and didn't leave. Now that she saw Zhang Yan, her expression was indifferent. She bowed slightly and returned the greeting. However, this woman was not as calm as she looked. She was confident that she could defeat Zhang Yan, but to get rid of him, the dragon carp was a huge obstacle. She thought for a while and thought, Senior Martial Brother is right. Since Zhang Yan is Zhou Chengzhu's disciple, he is a great enemy of the Zhou clan. In just 100 years, he has become so powerful. If we don't find a way to get rid of him, it will be even harder to kill him when his mana becomes purer and his sect becomes more powerful. However, this person has a flying sword and is good at escaping techniques. If he doesn't hit the enemy, he can still retreat far away. It will be hard to chase after him. The only way to defeat him is to trap him. After making up her mind, she flipped her hand and held up the talisman. Jinren Zhang, the talisman is here. Do you really want to fight for it? Zhang Yan stood in the air with his hands behind his back and laughed. This is my Yaoyin talisman, how can I give it to someone else? Zhou Qingyun nodded slightly. She looked at him and said coldly, since you chose it, don't blame me for being merciless. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his sleeves and made a hand sign. A dazzling spirit bead flew out from the clouds above. In an instant, a ray of light shot out. It was extremely dazzling, and in an instant, it covered the mountains and rivers within a radius of more than 10 miles. The light had just been released, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Compared to the lightning, it was much quieter. When everyone opened their eyes again, there was nothing in the sky. However, the sky was already empty, and the two of them were nowhere to be seen. Hu Xian saw this and his expression darkened. His face sank as he thought to himself, vast cloud sky. Does Zhou Qingyun have a grudge against junior martial brother Zhang? Why did she use this divine art? The vast cloud of breath was one of the 16 magical powers of the Yuxiao. It was similar to the heaven and earth confinement technique of the Yuanying third-tier cultivators. He could use a natal star bead to create a small world for cultivators to fight in. Even if the people outside wanted to interfere, they wouldn't be able to find a way in. Usually, Yuxiao school disciples would only use this divine ability in a life-and-death battle. Although there were many grievances between the Zhou clan and Zhang Yan, the Zhou clan had their own considerations. But he had never taken the initiative to publicize it. As for the Qinsang school, there were only 2 people who knew about this. The lower house master, Shi Shoujing, had passed away long ago. The other person was the AI clan's disciple, AI Zhongwen. He was not clear about the inside story. Since Zhang Yan did not mention this matter, he would not take the initiative to talk about it either, in case he got into trouble. Therefore, no one knew about it. When Yingye Daoren saw Zhou Qingyun use this divine art, he also did not know what was going on. He was shocked, shaking his head repeatedly. Although the Yuxiao school sent a letter to snatch the decree, there was no need to fight with his life on the line, right? He pondered for a while and said, Senior martial brother. Who do you think will win this time? The elder beside him stroked his beard and sighed, it's hard to say. Jinren Zhang's mana is strong and he has a flying sword in his hand. Normal Yuanying second-tier cultivators might not be able to take him down. And that Jinren Zhou is not a simple person either. Since she can use the vast cloud of breath, divine art, she must be cultivating the Heaven Universe Realm book. This art is mysterious and unpredictable. There must be many tricks up her sleeve. It's hard to predict who will win and who will lose. After Zhang Yan saw a flash of light, the scenery in front of him suddenly changed. He was already surrounded by a sea of white clouds. He had heard Zhou Chengzhu talk about the divine arts of the Yuxiao school in detail. With just a thought, he had already guessed what this divine art was. The auspicious clouds in the sky parted and Zhou Qingyun appeared, surrounded by dazzling starlight. She shouted down, Zhang Yan, no one can save you now that you've entered my art. In the Yuxiao school, there were 6 kinds of Xian arts called 4 Qis and 1 art. The art she cultivated was the best of the 4 Qis, the Heaven Universe Realm book. This art could only be cultivated by the disciples of the Zhou clan. There was a song that said, the Spirit Pearl Valley transforms the world, all 16 arts are collected. Collect the Clear Air True Art, reverse the stars and celestial phenomena. The disciples who cultivated this art, if there were no disasters and no injuries, would usually be able to refine a fate pearl every 100 years. After cultivating 7 stars above prominence, they would have the opportunity to enter the grotto heaven. What was even more amazing was that if the cultivator had no time to cultivate the divine arts, he could use his fate pearl as a deposit to condense a spell scroll and borrow the divine art first. In this way, the disciple could focus on improving. Even if they were to fight with others, they wouldn't be lacking in techniques. One had to know that the more divine arts a cultivator had, the more battle power they had. At the crucial moment, it could even be used to change the situation. Therefore, their battle power couldn't be estimated with common sense. Zhou Qingyun had been cultivating for 300 years, but she was more talented than others. Moreover, she had the secret arts of the Zhou clan. Other than the godly thunder star bead that she cultivated, she borrowed 3 divine arts. One of them was the vast cloud sky. She originally wanted to use this art when she was in the extreme heaven, but because she felt that Zhang Yan was a greater threat to the Zhou clan than the devil sect, she didn't hesitate to use it. However, this was a borrowed divine art after all. After using it once, the spell scroll would shatter. If she wanted to use it again, she wouldn't be able to use it in a short period of time. At this moment, she took out a hand seal and opened her palm. Dozens of sharp needles with 2 sharp ends and a length of a foot appeared. Her body emitted a colorful light that was as thin as gossamer. She pointed downwards and flew over. This item was called the Star God Golden Needle. It was a weapon that the Yuxiao school used to fight against the various sects in the world. There were 7 types of needles. The one she used now was called the White Magnetic Golden Needle. Once it got close to the flying sword, it could attract and pull it. Usually, it would only be used against Shaoqing cultivators. However, she didn't hesitate to use it against Zhang Yan now. Zhang Yan suddenly felt the starlight in front of him suddenly brighten. It was dazzling. The flying sword immediately moved according to his thoughts. It raised a shocking rainbow, and suddenly attacked, as if it was going to fight with the sword. However, when he got close, his gaze flickered slightly. With a thought, the sword pellets suddenly trembled and dispersed into 16 sword lights. They didn't come into contact with the flying needles and instead avoided them. They split up in the middle and flew away from the 2 sides. Although those golden thorns were swift and numerous, compared to the flying swords, they were still inferior. His reaction was just a beat slower and he was left far behind, unable to stop them. Zhou Qingyun's expression changed slightly. She waved her sleeves and countless white clouds floated in front of her, forming a cloud wall that hid her behind. The sword light had just passed through the clouds when Zhang Yan felt a sluggish feeling in his heart. It was far less smooth and harmonious than usual. He immediately knew that there was something wrong with the clouds that could stop his flying sword from passing through. He smiled slightly and didn't force it anymore. He called out with his mind and kept it back. Just now, Zhou Qingyun was watching the battle from the peak. She had seen Zhang Yan use his methods 3 times. The first time, he used the flying sword to slash the enemy, and the other 2 times, he used his vigorous mana to suppress the opponent. This was the strategy that she had decided before the battle. First, she would use her divine art to trap Zhang Yan, then use the golden needles and the clouds to restrain the flying sword. Finally, she would use her exquisite Dao techniques and talismans to continuously attack, not giving him a chance to prepare for a counterattack. This way, she would be able to firmly gain the upper hand. Now that she had successfully blocked the flying sword, she felt that her chances of winning had greatly increased. She rolled up her sleeves and pointed, controlling the flying needles to attack. At the same time, she silently circulated her heart technique and 7 dazzling star beads flew out from the high cloud. They lined up in a row, with the head and the tail of each other, and flew over. Zhang Yan shouted and circulated his mana. The high cloud above him rumbled, and dozens of purple lightning bolts burst forth. Not only did the star beads explode, but there were also more than 10 lightning bolts that shot out and went straight for Zhou Qingyun. The woman waved her sleeves, and the astral clouds above her trembled, bringing along a sparkling and clear ribbon that flew up. It spun around as if it was dancing, and layers of sparkling and translucent mist spread out. Thunder and lightning repeatedly struck down, but it was unable to penetrate. She was afraid of Zhang Yan's vigorous mana, and knew that she could not slack off in her attacks. She had to take the initiative, or else it would be difficult to withstand his attack. Therefore, she used her slender fingers to control a phoenix tail hairpin that was dotted with silver stars, and threw it down. Zhang Yan was activating the high wind to repel the white magnetic gold needles when he suddenly felt something flash past him. He reacted quickly, and without looking, he flicked his finger, and a drop of Xianming heavy water was released. It collided with the hairpin, and after a muffled sound, the two objects retreated. Zhou Qingyun's movements did not stop at all. She flipped her slender hand and took out a bronze mirror. She suddenly stood up and shone it below her. This was the 5-yang fixed mirror. Just like the phoenix tail hairpin from before, it was a profound weapon as well. Along with a wave of her delicate hand, numerous rays of mirror light that were like shooting stars descended with great momentum. As soon as they descended, a golden shell leaf floated up into the air and floated and revolved, blocking the starlight outside and not allowing a single ray to pass through. Although the two of them had only exchanged blows for a few breaths, their techniques, talismans, and supernatural powers had all competed. As long as one of them had a weaker foundation and did not have any way to counter it, they would be defeated and killed. If one was not a disciple of the 16 sets, they would probably be scared out of their wits. Zhang Yan nodded to himself. In all fairness, Zhou Qingyun was indeed a disciple of a large Xian sect. Not only were her supernatural powers and Daoist techniques amazing, she also had more than 2 Xian weapons to protect her, which was extremely difficult to break. Even if a Yuanying second-stage cultivator wanted to take down this woman, it would be extremely difficult. It was no wonder that Zhou Huang dared to send her here to fight. If he had only used an ordinary technique, he would have to spend a lot of effort to turn the tables. However, he had prepared more than one technique for this sword fight. If she thought that she could restrain him with just a few moves, it would be a big mistake. Zhang Yan smiled. He activated his mana and let out a long roar. From the high cloud above him, a dragon-catching hand of 100 feet in size stretched out and pushed away all the golden needles that were flying towards him. Then, he opened his hand and a spiritual light and clear air emerged from his palm. 72 banners that were as red as flames flew out from it. On the banners, there were patterns of beasts circling around the moon. They let out bursts of roars as if there were fierce beasts hiding in them. This was the 10,000 beasts sleeping moon banner that Tao Xinren had given him. Each side could hide more than 3,000 demon soldiers. As soon as they appeared, they flew in all directions like rainbows. Then, there was a loud noise that shook the sky. From the corner, the 6 gates and 6 restrictions appeared. Inside, demonic clouds rolled and evil spirits soared into the sky. The banners were like the sea and the spears were like the forest. Only the clamor of killing could be heard, as if there were millions of armored soldiers hidden inside. In just a moment, Zhang Yan had already arranged the 6 reincarnations burial formation in one go. Chapter 561. These 200,000 Lu family Yao soldiers usually hid in the 10,000 sleeping beast moon banner and slept in a daze, unaware of the passage of time. In Zhao Nether Prefecture, every month, Zhang Yan would let them out to eat, train, and regulate their breathing. The altar master of the formation gate would also pass down pills to them to help them improve their cultivation. After several years of training, this formation was already very familiar with it and no longer had many flaws like when they first started practicing. But now that they had just come out of the banner, most of them were still sleepy and didn't know where they were. Only Yao General Lu Changsu, because he was a core formation cultivator and the person who replaced Zhang Yan to control the formation, had some freedom and could meditate and cultivate as usual in the underwater palace. Now that he had woken up, he immediately knew that he had encountered a great enemy. He hurriedly went up the altar and picked up the formation flag. With a wave, the 200,000 Yao soldiers moved involuntarily under his command. In just a moment, banners rose from all the altars in response. When Zhang Yan went up the altar, he had already been waiting for a long time with the formation flag in hand. Zhang Yan nodded to him and said a few words of encouragement before going to the main seat. This, 6 recursions earth coffin formation, was not any weaker than the heaven and earth sealing technique of a Yuanying third-layer cultivator. But to kill a Yuanying spiritual master with the protection of a treasure with just this formation, he still needed the energy of the mountains and rivers and the earth veins. In reality, if the mountain and river diagram was used to suppress it, even if Zhou Qingyun's cultivation was a bit higher, she could still be easily killed. Just like the Reef Manor Lord Lu Yuanqing, who was a Yuanying second-layer cultivator, was instantly defeated by this formation without being able to resist at all. Unfortunately, the disciples of the various sects in the sword competition assembly were not allowed to use true treasures. If Zhang Yan rashly used it, the elders of the Yuxiao school might come to intervene. They might even find an excuse to kill him, so he could only work on his own for once. He took out the painting of mountains and rivers from his sleeve and slowly unrolled it. Then, he cast a spell and in a flash, he extracted a portion of the qi hidden in the painting of mountains and rivers and sent it into each of the formation doors. Following his incantation gesture, over 100 rays of light flew out, and a majestic mountain range gradually emerged from the formation. Although it wasn't as powerful as the mountain-river diagram, it was enough to deal with a Yuanying first-layer cultivator. When Zhou Qingyun first saw Zhang Yan release the banners, she thought that he was using some powerful Taoist technique, so her heart tightened. In view of this person's previous 2 attacks, both of them were earth-shattering and shockingly powerful. Therefore, she was exceptionally cautious. She took out her 2 protective profound artifacts and gathered her magic cloud. She was on guard and did not dare to make any rash moves. But when she came back to her senses, she was shocked to discover that she had actually fallen into a formation, and her jade-like face turned pale. She only knew that Qinsang School's Luo Qingyu seemed to be good at setting up formation diagrams, but she had never heard that Zhang Yan was also good at it. Zhang Yan had cultivated for less than 100 years and had already entered the Yuanying state. He also had a good set of Dao techniques, so how would he have the time to play with formation diagrams? Therefore, she had never thought about it. No matter how powerful a cultivator was, he would not be able to fight against a formation set up by a cultivator of the same generation. Usually, the so-called breaking of a formation was actually to find the veins of the formation. Trying to escape or break the center of the formation to fight against the formation head-on, unless there was a huge difference in cultivation, it would be a dead end. Thinking up to here, Zhou Qingyun gritted her teeth and used some kind of divine ability or Dao technique. A cloud of smoke appeared beneath her feet, and her figure flickered. In a single step, she had already arrived at one side of the formation, and her figure flickered again before she went to another corner. This technique was called Heavenly Cycle Square Inch, which was somewhat similar to Qinsang School's Small Heavens Shifting Escape technique. It was known as, 1 step on the stars, 100 days around the sky. If this technique was used, if one knew about the formation, they might be able to escape before the power of the formation was displayed. But Zhou Qingyun, as a disciple of the Zhou clan and a disciple of the Xianmen aristocratic family, only knew how to cultivate Dao techniques. The restriction of the cave abode and the flying boat were all set up by someone. Like many cultivators in the clan, she had never studied the formation, so how would she know how to break it? She took 3 steps and circled the formation, hoping to get out. But her luck was really bad, and she could not find the exit after a few tries. At this moment, blood suddenly rushed up to her throat, and her feet stagnated. She had no choice but to stop. She covered her chest and gasped a few times. She secretly checked and found that the talisman in the Pearl of Life had been broken, and she could no longer use this magical power. Zhang Yan, who was on the altar, saw her movements clearly. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile. In this formation, there were tens of thousands of doors and thousands of twists and turns. If he set up the formation, it was still possible for him to escape. But this formation of his was a living formation, it was formed by the arrangement of demon soldiers and not by the geography and mountains. It could advance and retreat at will. As long as he did not withdraw the vast sky of one breath, he could use the formation to expand outwards and slowly press forward. It was also unstoppable. He was so confident because he knew at a glance that this Tao technique that could create a small world was not something that Zhou Qingyun could cultivate with her current cultivation. She must have borrowed it from her pearl of fate and could only release it but not retract it. She had to wait until her Dharma power was exhausted. If it had been someone else, they might not have known the secret behind it, but Zhou Chongju had once been a direct descendant of the Zhou clan. Many of his divine abilities and Taoist techniques were no secret to him. In order to destroy the Zhou clan, he had given Zhang Yan a lot of information. After Zhang Yan suppressed his essence, he nodded to Lu Changsu and said, "You can set up the formation first so that I can see if you are unfamiliar with it." Lu Changsu was full of confidence and said, "Master, please sit down and watch me hold the formation." He bowed with a Tao salute. When he straightened his body, his face was already solemn. He waved the formation flag downwards and shouted, "Rise." After Zhou Qingyun's initial panic had passed, she had calmed down. She was thinking about how to get out of the formation when she suddenly felt something was wrong. She looked sideways and saw countless essence chi flying over from all directions. They gathered in the air and formed huge stone pillars. There were tens of thousands of them, and they almost covered the sky. At the same time, gusts of biting cold wind blew over and whistled around the stone pillars. It was like a knife rolling around the stone pillars, making a scratching sound. At this moment, thousands of vast smoke and fog rushed up from the ground and reached the sky. They crashed down again, causing dust to fly and the air to be filled with smoke. She was shocked by this scene. He hurriedly pulled up the translucent ribbon that was as clear as water. She spread out a large piece of the light mist fragments that were like ice crystals. However, she did not feel that it was safe. She drove the surrounding Dharma clouds over and piled them up in front of her. Lu Changsu took a look and waved the formation flag down heavily. More than 10,000 stone pillars received his order. They rumbled and fell like hail. The black wind and gray fog were thrown over, easily scattering the Dharma clouds and bombarding the crystal fog. Zhou Qingyun's heart sank, and her body trembled slightly. She knew that she could not just defend, so she picked up the 5-yang fixed mirror. She waved the mirror toward the sky. This mirror was indeed worthy of being a profound artifact. Wherever the light shone, rubble would collapse and disappear. Whether it was the turbid stone pillars or the violent wind and dust, they could not touch her body at all. Lu Changsu chuckled. He had been controlling the formation for a long time and knew how to play some tricks. These stone pillars and fog were actually real and fake. It wasn't as terrifying as it looked. If a cultivator didn't understand it, if a cultivator did not understand the principle, they would look like they were taking advantage of it on the surface, but in fact, they would fall into a trap without knowing it. Apart from wasting their Dharma powers, there was no other benefit. He was eager to show off his formation skills in front of Zhang Yan, so he did not use the formation's greatest power to kill the enemy. Instead, he wanted to display the subtle changes in the formation. Zhang Yan watched for a while and shook his head with a smile. If it was any other time, he would not object to Lu Changsu doing this. He might be able to exhaust Zhou Qingyun's Dharma powers and capture her alive. However, he did not have time to waste here, so he did not need to do this. He made a hand seal and slightly stabilized his essence chi. Then, he grabbed Lu Changsu's formation flag and said, "You can leave first." Lu Changsu was startled. He did not know if he had done something wrong, so he anxiously retreated behind him. Zhang Yan coldly took a few steps forward, raised the formation flag, and waved it a few times. In an instant, it was as if the heavens and the earth were shaking. Countless illusions of mountains appeared in the sky. He didn't even look at them. He pointed the flag downwards, and the mountains pressed downwards. Zhou Qingyun's face turned pale when she saw the mountains falling down. She had nowhere to run now, so she could only use her artifact and squeeze out the Dharma powers in her body to hold on with all her might. However, Zhang Yan's formation was pressing down on her, and it was not something she could resist alone. After holding on for a dozen breaths, the smoke net first collapsed and turned into specks of light. Zhou Qingyun took a deep breath and used the 5-yang fixing mirror. She took out a talisman from her pouch, bit her finger, and wiped it on her finger. In an instant, it was dyed red. She opened her lips and chanted an incantation. Immediately, a screen with mountains and rivers appeared from the ground. Suddenly she heard a kacha sound. The 5-yang fixing mirror couldn't withstand the pressure and shattered into pieces, falling down. She didn't hesitate any longer and hid behind the screen. When the mountains fell, it was like a mayfly trying to shake a tree. The screen did not move at all. A shadow flashed, and Mountain River Child came out. He pointed below and said, "Master, this is the illusion formed by the old man, Nanyang Shui Yen Ping, from Yuxiao School." Zhang Yan's eyes lit up when he heard this. Instead of being angry, he was happy. He smiled and said, "Okay, since you used the true artifact to protect yourself, you can't blame me. Mountain River Child, go to the main position to suppress it." Mountain River Child responded and turned into a ray of light, rushing to the mountain river diagram. Zhang Yan suddenly felt the flag in his hand sinking down. He quickly grabbed it and held the flag by the handle. He shook it slowly and gathered the essence of all the mountains, rivers, and earth veins in the formation. After a while, the aura gradually turned from illusory to solid, condensing into a towering mountain that supported the heavens and the earth. It was so tall that it seemed like it would be able to break the formation if it grew a few inches. Zhang Yan felt that it was enough. He shouted and pointed the formation flag below the altar. In an instant, it was as if the whole world had turned upside down. The sound of mountains collapsing and pillars collapsing rang in his ears. It rumbled into his eardrums and was about to burst. Zhang Yan's expression did not change. He was calm as usual. After a while, the aura gradually disappeared. He shook his sleeve and dispersed the fog. He looked down and saw Zhou Qingyun lying in the formation. Her lips were red and her face was pale. Looking at the top of her, the clouds were scattered and almost faded. The jade bead also lost its luster and seemed to have lost its spirituality. Zhang Yan took out a sword from his sleeve and went down the altar. He came in front of Zhou Qingyun and said calmly, "I promised senior brother Chong Ju that I would destroy your clan. Since you came knocking on my door today, I can't let you go." Zhou Qingyun also knew that her time was up. She said hatefully, "Zhang Yan, don't be complacent. My master will definitely avenge me." Zhang Yan smiled indifferently and didn't say anything else. He raised his hand and slashed. Where the sword light passed, Zhou Qingyun's head was already cut off. Chapter 562. A flickering light returned from the peak of Hunching Sect. Xia Keming floated down from the clouds like a feather and landed on the altar of Yuxiao School. WWWDYZWW, Part 1, he shook his sleeves and walked to Zhou Huang. He bowed and said, "Senior Martial Brother Zhou, I did not disappoint you." His trip was quite easy. Lu Muqiu of Hunching Sect obviously did not want him to fight with him. He came up and fought a few rounds with him. Then he retreated and successfully brought back the decree. Zhou Huang nodded and said with praise, "Junior Martial Brother did well. When Qingyun comes back, my Yuxiao School will have 3 talismans in hand." Xia Keming looked back at the sky and said, "It has been so long. Has Senior Martial Sister Zhou and Zhang Yan not decided a winner yet?" Zhou Huang laughed and said, "Qingyun has already used the vast cloud of one breath in the sky to trap Zhang Yan in a small world. Even if he has a flying sword, it will be difficult for him to escape. This is already a 50% chance of victory." However, this person has some skill. It will not be a short matter for Qing Yun to take him down. Junior brother just has to wait patiently. Xia Keming thought about it and felt that it was the case. No matter what, Zhang Yan was one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school. He was not someone those wandering cultivators could compare to. Even though Zhou Qingyun was skilled in Taoist arts, it would be difficult for her to defeat him in a short period of time. Even so, he could not help but show some worry on his face. Zhou Huang looked at him meaningfully and smiled. About the matter between you and Qingyun, I can go to the clan and ask the elders to mediate after the sword battle. The Zhou and Xia clans had been in-laws for generations. There were many disciples who became Dao companions. Anyone could see Xia Keming's feelings for Zhou Qingyun. Therefore, he was considered outstanding among the disciples of the Xia clan. This was why Zhou Huang thought highly of him. He was determined to do this. Xia Keming was startled at first and then overjoyed. He bowed deeply and said gratefully, "Thank you, senior martial brother." Zhou Huang smiled and nodded. He reached out and patted him on the shoulder as a sign of intimacy. On the other side, Hu Xian's expression couldn't help but become slightly solemn when he saw that the two of them hadn't come out after so long. Just now, he saw Zhou Qingyun unleash a great divine ability. He felt that there was more to this battle, and it wasn't as simple as fighting for talismans. Since Zhou Qingyun was able to attend the sword competition assembly, it could be seen that her status in the clan was quite high. As for Zhang Yan, there was no need to mention him. However, they were actually 2 of the 10 disciples of Qinsang school. If either one of them had an accident, it would be troublesome. At this moment, they were not the only ones paying attention to the battle. The disciples of the 10 schools and 6 sects, as well as the tens of thousands of cultivators in the Chengyuan Gorge, were also waiting for the outcome of the battle. After almost an hour, they heard the rumbling of thunder from the Green Jade Mountain. Everyone's spirits were lifted. He couldn't help but stare at the sky. After a short while, a clear white light appeared in the sky. Spirit chi surged, rays of dazzling light spread in all directions. Then, they saw Zhang Yan using the blue sky as a screen, riding the wind and descending from the clouds. His robe fluttered, not a speck of dust could be seen. But the surprising thing was, it was clearly a battle between the 2 of them, but at this moment, only he appeared. Zhou Huang's expression changed. His expression was bewildered. Ingye Daoren, on the other hand, couldn't help but stand up, shock in his eyes. Xia Keming looked left and right, but he couldn't see Zhou Qingyun. He was extremely anxious. He couldn't hold back anymore and quickly chased after Zhang Yan to the peak of the Yaoyin clan. He rushed to the front and shouted, "Zhang Yan, where is my senior sister?" Hearing this, Zhang Yan stopped, turned around, and said calmly, "So it's spiritual master Xie. To tell you the truth, your senior sister has already died under my sword." Xia Keming's eyes widened, revealing a look of disbelief. He pointed at Zhang Yan and said with a trembling voice, You say that again." Zhang Yan's expression was calm, but he didn't say anything. Xia Keming's expression twisted, and he roared, "You dare to kill my Yuxiao school's disciple?" Zhang Yan's expression was calm, and he said, "Since our 2 clans are fighting for talismans, it's inevitable that there will be casualties. Why is fellow Xia making such a fuss? It's not losing your identity. You say it so easily." Xia Keming seemed to be incomparably sorrowful and furious, and he repeatedly pounded his chest a few times before gasping for breath. When he raised his head again, his eyes had already become completely red, and he gnashed his teeth as he said, "All right, then let me experience what ability you, spiritual master Zhang, have as well." As soon as he finished speaking, he shouted loudly, and the astral cloud above him swiftly emitted a ball of brilliance. In the next moment, a smooth jade pearl rose up and hung in the air, and it emitted over 100 rays of brilliance that were like silver and golden arrows. Zhang Yan smiled lightly, flicked his sleeve, and turned around to return to the altar before sitting down and saying, "The decree is already in my hands, why should I continue fighting with you?" Xia Keming was stunned when he heard this, and he slightly calmed down, but his gaze still didn't leave Zhang Yan. He took out his own decree from his sleeve and tossed it on the ground, then he pointed at it and said, "There's a decree here, are you willing to fight with me? If you win, feel free to take it. If you lose, I want you to pay with your life for my senior sisters." His last sentence was filled with hatred, and it seemed as if it was squeezed out from the cracks between his teeth. Zhang Yan chuckled and shook his head. Xia Keming said sternly, "Could it be that you don't dare to?" Zhang Yan turned his gaze over and raised his eyebrows. "It's not that I look down on you, spiritual master Zhou, but can you decide whether this decree stays or goes?" Xia Keming couldn't help but be stunned. Logically speaking, this decree already belonged to Yuxiao school, and a disciple of his school naturally couldn't make the decision on his own. However, at this moment, he was just looking for an excuse to fight. He flicked his sleeve and shouted, "You want the decree, and the decree is already here. Today, you must fight with me." Zhang Yan ignored him and closed his eyes. Zhang Boyan and Priest Su walked over, one on the left and one on the right, expressionlessly. Xia Keming sneered. He wasn't afraid of these two people, but just as he was about to make a move, he saw a ray of brilliance sweeping across the sky, arriving in the blink of an eye. Zhou Huang appeared from the light and shouted, "Junior brother Xia, stop right now." Xia Keming stopped in his tracks and looked up, saying sorrowfully, "Senior brother, you came at the right time, senior sister, she..." Zhou Huang waved his hand at him, cutting him off. He looked down and rolled up his sleeve, taking the decree under his feet. He then looked at Zhang Yan and said with a gloomy face, "Where is my junior sister's corpse and primordial spirit?" Zhang Yan met his gaze and gave him 4 words, "Destroyed in both body and spirit." Zhou Huang's eyebrows twitched, and his eyes were filled with endless killing intent. At this moment, a ray of brilliance that looked like a blazing sun suddenly flew over and hovered above the peak. Then, the brilliance parted, and Huoxian poked his head out, smiling at Zhang Yan, "Junior brother, I have something to ask of you." His gaze shifted, as if he was surprised, "So fellow Zhou is here. Are you also here to look for junior brother Zhang?" Zhou Huang took a deep breath and calmed his expression. He grabbed Xia Keming's shoulder and said solemnly, "Let's go." Even though Xia Keming was very unwilling, he did not dare to disobey Zhou Huang's orders. He glared at Zhang Yan with hatred and left with the flowing light. On top of the cloud, Xia Keming said in grief and indignation, "Senior brother, why did you stop me?" Zhou Huang barked, "Have you lost your mind or something? What excuse do you have to fight with him? Just now, Qin Yun is fighting with Zhang Yan for the talisman. On the surface, she is following the rules of the sword duel. If you go up and fight now, not only will you not have any reason, you will only make my Yuxiao school a laughing stock." Xia Keming said in grief and indignation, "Senior sister has fallen to such a miserable state. Are we just going to let it go?" Zhou Huang's gaze was cold, and he said, "Zhang Yan killed my Zhou clan's disciple, how can we let him go? I have my own plans for this matter, you must not act rashly." Seeing the two of them leave, Zhang Yan stood up and cupped his hands towards Huoxian, who was above, and said with a smile, "Senior brother Hua, I wonder why you are looking for me." Huoxian descended from high above and landed on the spell altar, and said, "This brother has come for the monster that is snatching the talisman just now, I need to trouble junior brother to lend a hand." Zhang Yan said in surprise, "With the strength of the 3 of you, could it be that you are still unable to take down this person?" Huoxian shook his head and said, "This monster has already been trapped by me and my 2 junior brothers, but he has used my Qinsang school's 4-symbol sky shuttle to lay down a profound formation. If we want to break it, we must borrow the 5 spirits white carp shuttle in junior brother's hands." Zhang Yan said cheerfully, "This is also what I should do. There is no time to lose, I will go with senior brother right away." Huoxian did not have the slightest hostility towards him in the sect, and instead helped him a few times. Although he did not stand on the same side as him in this sword battle, Zhang Yan also understood that Huoxian had to consider too many things as he sat in this position, and sometimes he did not have control over himself. Zhang Yan had already expected this, so he did not take it to heart. The two of them spoke a few more words on the peak, and then both of them rode on flying lights and descended the peak. From the beginning to the end, Hu Xian did not mention anything about Zhou Qingyun, as if it had never happened. The two of them walked along the river to the mouth of the canyon, and saw a cloud of light about the size of an acre blocking the entrance. Like a cocoon, there were a total of 4 colors, green, white, red, and black, shimmering and intertwining with each other. Zhong Muqing and Luo Qingyu were guarding there, and seeing the two of them coming over, they both cupped their hands. In addition to them, there was another Daoran with a horsetail whisk standing there, but he did not say anything and did not move. Zhang Yan recognized this person as the Qin clan elder, and he had seen him from afar when he sent Hu Xian and the others away. When the flying light under their feet stopped on the river, Hu Xian said, "Junior brother Zhang, to break this formation, we need 4 people to guard the 4 corners of the formation. Elder Chen, junior brother Zhong, and junior brother Luo will each guard a direction, and we will attack together later. After the 4 sky shuttles are restrained by us, junior brother, please take out the 5 spirit white carp shuttle and attack the weak points." Zhang Yan took a few glances and saw that this formation was not very mysterious, and it was purely relying on the power of the 4 sky shuttles. Hu Xian's method was to counter it with force. Although it was a little unreasonable, it could break the formation in the shortest time, and it could be considered as the right medicine, so he nodded and said, "That's good." Hu Xian gave a few more instructions, then he leaped up and stood in the south position. Zhong and Luo took the north and east positions respectively, while the Qin clan elder waved his horsetail whisk and lightly moved his feet, standing in the west position. P.S. Yesterday, I had a gathering with friends and drank too much, so I went to sleep when I came back. This chapter was added from yesterday. There will be more updates tonight. Chapter 563. When Luo Canghai saw the 4 of them standing outside, each guarding a position, he guessed that Hu Xian and the others had a way to break the formation. He didn't want to sit and wait for death. He reached into his bosom and took out a porcelain bottle. He poured out a few pills and swallowed them. He then sat on the white python's body and circulated his transcendence energy. After a while, the pills were completely dissolved. He breathed out a mouthful of murky air and his eyes flashed. He pointed to the sky and summoned all the spiritual energy in his body. The 4 rays of light in the formation seemed to have been supplemented with strong medicine. They emitted a buzzing sound as they soared and danced in the air. Their speed was doubled, and when they shuttled back and forth, they were so dense that it was almost impossible to distinguish them from each other. Even though Hu Xian and the others were unable to see his movements, they were able to guess what he'd done in response to the ferocious might of the formation. However, the 5 people present didn't really care. They were going to break the formation with force anyway. No matter how it changed, it wouldn't change the result. Hu Xian looked around, and when he saw that the 4 of them had taken their positions, he shouted, "Everyone, let's begin." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone except Zhang Yan shouted in unison and threw out a talisman. They commanded it to be thrown to the front of the formation, and then they used their spiritual power to activate it. With a rumble, it immediately turned into a stone tablet that was 100 feet tall, and it instantly suppressed the earth chi that came from all directions. The 4 symbols formation originally drew in the energy of the 4 directions and circulated it back and forth, causing it to be endless. These 4 tablets pressed down on the 4 corners. Although they were unable to completely cut off the flow of energy, they had already shaken the foundation of the formation. Unless the person in charge of the formation used the power of the formation to destroy it, the formation would definitely weaken uncontrollably until it became completely useless. However, during this process, seeing this situation, Luo Canghai felt that it would take at least 10 days to half a month. He only let out a few sneers and didn't do anything. But when he thought about it carefully, he didn't feel that Hu Xian and the others only had these tricks up their sleeves. Thus, he didn't let his guard down and continued to activate the 4 symbols heavenly shuttle. He first stabilized the formation, and his gaze was constantly on the outside to prevent any changes from occurring. Hu Xian turned around. He turned to Zhang Yan and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Zhang, we will attack each other using the attraction force. If you find a weak point, you can attack on your own. You don't need to pay attention to us." If he failed the first time, there was no need to be impatient. He could slowly search for flaws. "We'll definitely be able to break it." Zhang Yan nodded slowly. The timing of his attack was extremely important. If he was able to find the weak point of the qi and strike it, then he would be able to strike it with a single strike and break open the restriction. He was afraid that it would come a few more times. Fortunately, he was someone who had a rough understanding of formations, and was not an ignorant person. This profound formation was laid out by Luo Canghai in a hurry, and it was very crude and simple. It was only possible because of the 4 sky shuttles. Therefore, he only took a few glances and already had a card up his sleeve. He knew where to start later. Hu Xian formed a hand seal and the high cloud above his head immediately grew, expanding to a size of 300 meters, enveloping the place where he was standing. Because of his profound technique, his entire person was bathed in a golden light. After a while, as if he was smelting metal, the light of golden fire appeared on his body. Only a rumbling sound could be heard as over 100 bolts of high lightning fell with a loud bang. Seeing that he had made his move, Zhong, Luo, and that elder Qin did not fall behind. All of them gathered the high cloud together and activated their thunder arts, bombarding the 4 sky shuttles formation in unison. In an instant, the sounds of explosions were as dense as a torrential rain, reverberating endlessly within the valleys and peaks. Because the people who attacked were all not weak, this attack was as fast as the crackling thunder and blazing fire, continuous and continuous, without the slightest gap. Even though Luo Canghai had the formation to defend himself, he was not having an easy time at this moment. Every time lightning struck, his body would unceasingly tremble along with it. He could only desperately release his mana to maintain the formation. He gritted his teeth and said, "Let me see how long you can last." Although attacking without caring about the consumption of mana was mighty, he did not think that Hu Xian and the others could maintain it for long. As long as one of them could not hold on, there would be no restraints on the corner, and he would have a chance to catch his breath. The 4 of them attacked for a full moment. Seeing that Zhang Yan was still standing at the side without making a move, Elder Chen was a little dissatisfied. He frowned and said, "Marshal Nephew Zhang, why are you still not attacking? With us here, you can go ahead and try. Even if you miss, no one will blame you." Before Zhang Yan could speak, Hu Xian already spoke first and said, "Marshal Uncle, Junior Brother Zhang definitely has his reasons for not attacking now. There is no need to rush him." Elder Chen glanced at him and said, "I am thinking for you. I am afraid that you will make a mistake and miss this demon thief. You will not be able to explain yourself when you return. Since you are not in a hurry, I have nothing to say." Luo Qingyu smiled and said, "Elder Chen, there is no need for you to worry. Back then, when that person set up the 4 symbols God-killing array, in the 3 pools, it was Junior Brother Zhang who broke through it alone. Back then, Marshal Uncle Meng even praised him for his talent in formations. I think this formation will not be a problem for him." Zhang Yan turned a deaf ear to Elder Chen's question. Since the 4 of them started attacking, his eyes were fixed on the formation. After the 4 sky shuttles were slowly restrained, there was actually a gap in the formation. However, he could see that the most suitable opportunity had not appeared yet, so he was still waiting there patiently. After the time it took to finish a cup of tea, Hu Xian and the other 3 felt that their spiritual power was running out. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he didn't hesitate to raise the 5-spirit white carp shuttle in the air. In an instant, a golden light flashed across the sky. As it flew too fast, it made a sharp whistling sound as it tore through the atmosphere. The spirit shuttle violently crashed into the formation, and like a clap of thunder, the formation violently trembled as if it had been struck by a giant hammer. The four-colored earth and chi that was originally flowing back and forth in an orderly manner seemed to have been stirred up by something, and in the blink of an eye, it became chaotic and disorderly. Huoxian thought that Zhang Yan would need to try a few times before he could find the meridians. He did not expect the five-spirit white carp shuttle to peck at the vital point of the formation. With just one peck, it worked. He could not help but be overjoyed and said, "Everyone, don't stop." The other three people's spirits were roused and they increased their attacks. But after a few breaths, the formation was finally unable to bear the burden. After a cracking sound, it was announced that it was broken. The restrained chi in the formation immediately turned into countless spirit tides that surged out and flowed in all directions. Following the collapse of the formation, Luo Canghe felt as if he was struck by lightning. The formation's power attacked his heart and he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His expression immediately became extremely weary and he collapsed on the back of the white python, gasping for breath. At this time, he had no time to care about the four sky shuttles. Therefore, the four profound weapons each throbbed and were guided by a trace of their own spirit. They all soared into the air and wanted to follow the chi in all directions. This treasure originally belonged to the Qinsong, so how could Huoxian allow it to escape? He waved his sleeve and a large ball of red light that was burning like fire flashed out and immediately forced the scarlet sky shuttle that was flying towards him to fly back. The skyless shuttle was still not convinced. It screeched and turned into a vermilion bird with flaming feathers. It continued to charge forward, but now that it had lost its master's control, its momentum was reduced by more than half. It collided with the skyless shuttle twice and was forced back without exception. After that, it struggled a few more times, but no matter where it went, it was controlled by the flowing golden flames. After a while, the skyless shuttle was gradually subdued by the flames. It cried out and became obedient. Huoxian waved his hand and the vermilion bird flew into his hand like a young swallow returning to the forest. When he looked again, it had already transformed into a translucent jade spirit shuttle that was red like blood. The two ends of the shuttle were pointed and the middle part was full and slightly bulging. There was a little red light circling inside the shuttle. When he looked carefully, he saw that it was an extremely small nimble vermilion bird that was flying back and forth inside the shuttle. On the north side, Zhong Muqing saw that the sky shuttle shook and transformed into a mighty black tortoise. It seemed like it was going to dive into the water. He smiled and stretched out two of his fingers. A black gas flew out from his fingertips and landed on the back of the sky shuttle. The black gas seemed to be carrying a heavy weight and instantly pressed down on the sky shuttle. He then pinched his fingers to cast a spell and chanted a spell. After casting a few spells, the black tortoise immediately became obedient and no longer struggled. With a flash of spiritual light, it turned into a black shuttle that floated in the air. He cast a spell and grasped it in his hand. Luo Qingyu was standing on the east side. When he saw that the sky shuttle was trying to escape to the east, he was calm and composed. He spread out his 5 fingers and his mana surged. The mana turned into wisps of green gas and flew out. The gas intertwined and formed into a net that covered the sky. The green dragon that was formed by the green sky was caught off guard and rushed into the net. He smiled and closed his 5 fingers again. The green gas was pulled in and the body of the green dragon was tightly bound. With a whimper, the green dragon turned into a green shuttle. As for Elder Chen, he did not even look at it. He made a circle with the horsetail whisk in his hand and caught a white sky shuttle in it. When he looked inside, he saw a white tiger stamping with rage. It roared and charged left and right, pouncing back and forth. However, it was as if it was trapped in a cage and could not break out. When the mana attached to it was exhausted, it turned into a white shuttle amidst its roars and stopped. In just a short while, the 4 symbols sky shuttle formation was broken by the 5 of them. Even the 4 sky shuttles were suppressed. When the 4 shuttles left, there was a sudden loud sound of water. A water column that was more than 100 feet thick shot up into the sky. One could vaguely see a black-scaled python climbing the clouds and waves. It twisted its body and escaped into the clouds. The python's eyes were like bright lights. Its body was more than 40 feet long. There were claws under its abdomen that were as hard as metal. It looked extremely ferocious. Hu Xian and the others saw that it was trying to escape. They turned into rainbow lights and flew into the sky to intercept it. Zhang Yan looked up and reminded them, "Senior brothers, be careful. This demon can use the death substitution technique. Don't let it escape." Luo Canghai had indeed intended to shed his skin and take his place in death, and then seize the opportunity to flee. However, this method could only be executed if his opponent was caught off guard. But at this moment, Zhang Yan had seen through him with a single sentence, and he knew that he was unable to flee. He was ferocious. He stopped himself with a loud roar and turned around with the intention of fighting with his life on the line. Hu Xian's expression was calm as he swung his hand, and a golden spear appeared in the sky. This spear swallowed light and grew, instantly stretching to 30 feet in length. Four-clawed coiling dragons coiled around the spear, and it suffused with auspicious light and multicolored light. Luo Canghai seemed to have recognized what this spear was. His expression changed abruptly and revealed terror in his eyes. Before he could retreat, Hu Xian pointed out, and the golden spear flashed like a bolt of lightning. It instantly penetrated Luo Canghai's body, and he let out a shrill howl as he fell from the clouds. Chapter 564. The golden spear fell from the sky like a meteor, piercing straight into the river. Because the spear was too long, the front half of the spear sank deep into the mud at the bottom of the river, but the end was still above the surface. The black python was firmly nailed to the spot, and the golden spear coincidentally pierced through its neck. Half of its body was submerged in the water, faintly discernible. It looked like it was on the verge of death, and not long after, the surrounding river water was dyed red by the dirty blood that flowed down. Many cultivators on the shore exclaimed. There were many demon cultivators in Donghua continent, but most of them were of low cultivation level. In the past thousands of years, many of them had been killed by the devil sect. It was their first time seeing such a huge demon python, and they were all guessing its origin. Hu Xian and the other three stepped on the clouds, and slowly descended into the river. Luo Qingyu glanced at the demon python and thought for a while. He turned around and said, "Senior Hua, in my opinion, this demon is not suitable for us to deal with. Let's not take its life for now, and bring it back to the elders to decide." Hu Xian slowly nodded his head, obviously agreeing with Elder Chen's opinion. From this demon's mouth, they might even be able to investigate many things about that fierce person. Thus, he cupped his hands towards Elder Chen and said, "Elder, please take action and subdue this demon." Elder Chen said expressionlessly, "Martial Nephew Hua, please move the great sun dragon sparrow spear away first. I have a way to take it." Hu Xian saw that the black python had no more strength to struggle, so he shook his shoulder lightly. The golden spear sensed it and flew up, disappearing into his high cloud in the blink of an eye. Nascent soul cultivators could place their dharma treasures in the astral clouds to be nourished. After a long time, it could be used as one's own qi. If one wanted it, its power would be 2 to 3 times stronger. Even if it was taken away by others, it could not be used without the non-phase contract. However, this method had a drawback. Even if the treasure was damaged, it would inevitably affect its owner. Even though the benefits were great, not everyone was willing to do it. Elder Chen raised his hand, and took out a jade box from his sleeve. He opened its cover, and a green light was emitted from it. It shrouded the black python's body, and shook for a while. In a flash, he stowed it away. A moment later, he closed the box and tossed it into his sleeves. Seeing that the black python had been retracted, Zhong Muqing turned around and cupped his hands, saying, "Senior Martial Brother Hua, what should we do with these 4 sky shuttles?" Hu Xian said sternly, "We'll return it to the sect master when we return." Hearing him say this, Zhong and Luo did not say anything. Although they felt it was a pity, they did not insist. Xian looked at the two of them and smiled. Yes, bring it back to the sect. He would have to wait until after the duel to ensure his safety. For now, I'll leave it in the hands of the two junior brothers. Luo Qingyu and Zhong Muqing looked at each other and smiled. They cupped their hands together and said, "Yes, senior brother Hua." Even though these 4 sky shuttles were not as powerful as before after being separated, it was still a profound weapon. If they could find a way to refine it, they would have an additional talisman to protect themselves when they ascend to the extreme heaven, which would be beneficial to them. As for taking possession of this treasure, no one had such thoughts. To use the 4 symbols sky shuttles to its full power like Luo Canghai's, it would require a compatible mystical method. They had their own method of inheritance and would not change to another method halfway through. Elder Qin seemed to want to avoid arousing suspicion. With a wave of his hand, he threw the white tiger sky shuttles to Xian and said, "This item is useless with me, junior marshal nephew Hua, I'll leave it to you." Xian took it and pondered for a moment. He turned around and walked towards Zhang Yan. When he was close, he handed over the sky shuttles and said politely, "It's all thanks to Junior Marshal Brothers' effort that we could break the 4 symbols sky shuttles formation this time. I'll leave this treasure in Junior Marshal Brothers' care." Zhang Yan knew that Xian said he was leaving it to him to take care of, but in reality, he was lending it to him. Zhang Yan did not refuse and accepted it with a carefree smile. He then cupped his hands and bowed as thanks. At this moment, a thunderous sound suddenly came from the sky. Everyone raised their heads to look and saw that the curtain of the sky was like an eye opening. There was a splendor about a mile wide pouring down like a river. When it reached the bottom, it was even more like a torrential wave. The spiritual energy contained within it was incomparably dense, causing people to wonder if they were standing in a paradise. The cultivators on both sides of the river cried out in surprise. They all sat down cross-legged and greedily absorbed the spiritual energy. They came to the sword competition assembly this time to observe the battles of the various sects and broaden their horizons. They also came to try their luck. With such benefits, how could they miss it? Xian looked at the sky a few times. His expression was calm. It wasn't strange at all. Such a strange phenomenon was caused by the restriction on the object dispersing. Once the divine gate was opened, the spiritual energy hidden inside would leak out. He said, "Junior brothers, please return to your respective peaks to breathe and adjust your breathing. 2 days later, you'll be able to leave for the ultimate heaven." The leakage of this spiritual energy would only last for 1 or 2 days. For small sects of itinerant cultivators, it was something that could only be chanced upon. Even core formation cultivators could benefit from it, but for Yuaniing cultivators from large sects like them, it wasn't of much use. Therefore, they didn't really care about it. The 4 of them exchanged a few more words before they bowed to each other and bid farewell. Xian and the others then returned to their peaks first. Zhang Yan also wanted to leave, but he had only taken 1 step when a thought suddenly emerged in his mind. He stopped moving and turned around again. His eyes slightly narrowed as he stared at the water. He knew that the backlash of the formation power was indeed powerful, but those who were experienced in fights of magical powers would try to seek luck and avoid disaster. As the disciple of that fierce person, how could Luo Canghai not be on guard? There were many suspicious points in this. Especially when he had fought with this demon before. The other party could be said to be crafty and cunning. Even though he had exposed the death substitution technique, it was a little too easy for him to take down the demon so easily. His eyes flickered slightly. Suddenly, he bent his finger and flicked. The Xianming heavy water suddenly shot out. With a thump, it rushed into the water and hit the white python that was hiding at the bottom of the river. Just as it was about to touch its body, the huge python suddenly twisted its body and actually dodged it. Zhang Yan laughed and said, "Fellow Taoist Luo's technique, I was almost fooled by you." With a splash, the waves were lifted, and the white python scuttled out. It was riding on a cloud in the sky, its sharp claws holding onto the cloud. It looked down from above and spoke in human language, Zhang Yan, I don't think there's any flaw in this supernatural power of mine. How did you see through it? Just now, he was using the supernatural power passed down in his family, which was called reincarnation in a corpse. Like the devil's sex body changing technique, once it was used, it would greatly reduce one's cultivation. And this Tao technique of his, after giving birth to a pair of brothers, only one of them would be left in this world, and the other would be refined into a life-changing vessel. If he encountered a dangerous situation where he could not escape, as long as they were within 1,000 feet of each other, he could use the supernatural power to transfer his spirit into another body. Not only would his cultivation not regress, even his old injuries would be healed, as if he was reborn. With this supernatural power, the disciples of the Luo family had an extra life. But unless it was a real life and death situation, they would not use it lightly. But he did not expect that such a secret matter would actually be seen through by Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan laughed and said, even though you lost the 4 symbols heavenly shuttle, your performance at the end was too bad. It was as if you were at the mercy of others, which was too suspicious. If you had fought hard and then pretended to be defeated, it would really be difficult to see through it. Luo Canghai stared at him for a moment, then his python body shook and returned to his human form, and there was no sign of exhaustion in his expression. At this moment, light and shadow flickered, and 4 streaks of light suddenly arrived and surrounded Luo Canghai. It turned out that Huxian and the others had noticed the commotion here and turned back halfway. Huxian's expression was solemn as he said, good technique. If it wasn't for junior brother Zhang noticing, we would have really been deceived by you. Elder Chen's expression was not too good as well. He prided himself as a respected elder, yet he was unable to see through the flaw, and he felt that he had lost quite a bit of face. All of them had seen the white python earlier, but because of its long lifespan, it had grown especially strong, and it didn't possess the slightest bit of cultivation. They only took it to be a mount, and it was an insignificant thing in their eyes, so they didn't pay much attention to it. However, they never imagined that Luo Canghai actually possessed such a divine ability, and it was truly unexpected. Luo Canghai looked around and sneered without end. He circulated his cultivation technique, and the strong cloud above him transformed into a black cloud that was 300 meters tall. Water sprayed out like a spring, and the waves circled around thousands of layers. As the waves rolled, the sound of tides could be heard. He originally wanted to wait for Zhang Yan and the others to leave before breaking through the restriction and leaving a message to ridicule them. But in the end, he still failed on the verge of success. Up until now, he had exhausted all his methods and had no more tricks up his sleeves. But it was impossible for him to just give up like this. Even if he was no match for Luo Canghai, he would only give up after a fight. At this moment, Luo Qingyu suddenly stood out and said, it was the 2 senior brothers who seized the talisman earlier, why don't you hand this person over to me? Among the 3 disciples of Qinsang school, his cultivation technique was the most tenacious, and the formation diagram in his hand was to encircle the opponent and fight with him, so it was difficult for outsiders to see the mystery within. Huxian pondered for a while. Just now, Luo Canghai might not be able to defeat Luo Qingyu even at his peak. Now that the 4 symbols heavenly shuttle was gone, Luo Canghai had lost his claws and teeth. Even if he still had any skills, Luo Qingyu would not be difficult to deal with. So he said with relief, all right, I'll leave this evildoer to you. Luo Qingyu cupped his hands and bowed. Then, he straightened his fingers and made a gesture. In an instant, a green light spread out and a landscape painting appeared under his feet. The painting was misty and illusory, and there was a faint sound of the ancient zither, which lingered in the air, elegant and distant. Zhang Yan had entered the Qing Ping Han Yan formation diagram before, so he was not completely clueless about it. However, at this moment, it seemed to be very different from what he had seen before, and there were many inexplicable changes. It seemed that this formation diagram had been refined to a higher level. Luo Canghai was surrounded in the middle, but he could not escape. Seeing that there was only one person to fight with him, it was exactly what he wanted, so he did not struggle, but let out a humph and let the formation diagram drag him in. After a while, the painting scroll closed, and the two figures disappeared, leaving only a cloud of clear air, like a towering mountain, deep and dark, still in the same place. After a while, the green air suddenly surged, and the auspicious clouds slowly dispersed. A light green spiritual light shot out from it, and paved a path. Luo Qingyu, dressed in green, stepped out of the cloud light, and Luo Canghai was nowhere to be seen. He came in front of the crowd, bowed and said, "My fellow disciples, I have taken down the evildoer." Chapter 565. Since Luo Canghai was captured, there was nothing left to do here. After saying goodbye to Hu Xian and the others, Zhang Yan returned to the peak with the help of Feng Yun. He meditated and adjusted his qi, waiting for the time to go to the extreme heaven. The night passed in the blink of an eye. On the second day, when the rooster crowed, the bell on Dan Raising Peak suddenly rang. All the peaks heard it. It was to summon the disciples of Xianmen to discuss matters. In a flash, dozens of light rays shot up the peak. In less than a moment, the disciples of the 10 sects and the elders of the sects all arrived at the hall on Dan Raising Peak. This time, Ingye Daoren sat on the right, and the person in the main seat was Elder Lu, who had been meditating in the back of the mountain since the sword fight. This time, Doran's hair and beard were all white. His eyes were bright, and he was in high spirits. He held a horsetail whisk in his arms and looked like an immortal. When everyone met, it was inevitable for them to be courteous. After greeting each other, they sat down on the praying mats. Elder Lu waited for everyone to sit down, then he knocked the jade chime beside him. When everyone in the hall looked at him, he said loudly, "Although Xianmen had the upper hand in the sword fight these 2 days, only the disciples of the 5 sects can go to the extreme heaven with the talisman. This has weakened the power of Xianmen, and this is very inappropriate. Yuanyang sect didn't get the talisman this time because of an accident. Yang Jinren and his wife are both powerful. If they can go to the extreme heaven with the talisman, they will have a higher chance of winning against the disciples of the devil sect. Everyone, what do you think?" As soon as he finished speaking, a burst of laughter rang out from his seat. Tong Yingyuan of the Southern Flower sect took the initiative to step forward. He cupped his fists and said, "Elder Lu, forgive me for not informing you earlier, but our Supreme Sky sect has obtained a total of 2 decrees this time. Seeing that Yuanyang sect is also a member of the Profound Tao, we have already given the other decree to fellow Taoist Yang. He and his wife can go to the extreme heaven now." Elder Lu was startled. He looked at Yang Bai with a questioning look on his face. The Supreme Sky sect had always been on good terms with the Southern Flower sect, but their relationship with the Yuanyang sect was very shallow, and it was rare for them to interact with each other. Not only him, even the Nye brothers of the Southern Flower sect looked over with surprised gazes, obviously not understanding the reason behind this. Yang Bai stood up with a smile and cupped his hands, "Elder Lu. Fellow Taoists, fellow Taoist Tong's words are true." Elder Lu chuckled, stroked his beard and smiled, "That's good, Daoren is worrying too much." At this moment, the Shaoqing disciple Sun Huaying suddenly said, "I only need a talisman. Any more is useless. Elder Lu, you can give it to whoever you want." Without seeing him move, a talisman flew out. Lu Daoren hurriedly took it and held it in his hand. He immediately perked up and bowed solemnly. "Thank you, perfected Sun." Sun Huaying's face was expressionless as she responded calmly. Elder Lu lowered his head and thought for a while. He slowly said, "A talisman can protect the 2 of them when they go into that object. In I's opinion, this talisman should be given to the Taoist of Li Mountain sect. Bu Tian sect, Anata sect, Li Mountain sect, and Ping Du sect did not obtain the talisman. 2 disciples of Anata sect died. Ping Du sect and Bu Tian Pavilion only had 1 disciple left. Only 2 from Li Mountain sect were left. In the upper pole's sword duel, one more person meant one more chance of winning. No one said anything when the talisman was given to Li Mountain sect. Most of them nodded in agreement. Chao Minru stood up. Wan Fu bowed and said, "I'm ashamed to accept it." Elder Lu nodded and smiled. With the matter of the talisman settled, there was nothing else. After staying on the peak for an hour, everyone went their separate ways. After Elder Lu personally sent everyone off, he and Ingya Daoran stood on the peak together and looked up at the sky. It was the first quarter of an hour in the morning and the sun had yet to rise. The sky was still dark and the moon and stars could not be seen. Elder Lu gazed at the sky for a long time and suddenly asked, "Junior Marshal Brother, do you think our Xian men will be able to pass this sword duel?" Ingya Daoran was surprised. "Senior brother, why do you say that?" He thought for a while and said, "Senior brother, let's not talk about Sun, Hua, and Zhou Jinren. Even Zhang Jinren's mana is not bad. There's also Yang Jinren and his wife, Tong Jinren, and Nia Kuan-zhong. Which one of them is weaker than the disciples of the demonic sect? In this little brother's opinion, this should be a sure-win situation." Elder Lu looked at the gloomy sky and sighed, "I hope so." At the same time, opposite the river bank, the demonic cloud that hung in the sky for 2 days descended and covered the peak. Looking from the outside, one could only see shadows of people, green flames, and black fog covering the mountain. It was dark and gloomy. However, the inside was completely different. The hall was filled with colors and the lights were as bright as day. The cultivators of the 6 demonic sects who came for the sword duel were all gathered in this temple to discuss how to deal with Xian men. On the seat, Daoran, who wore a brown robe, flung his robe and stood up. He stretched out 4 fingers and said, "In this sword duel, Xian men should be careful of 4 people. Once these 4 people are gone, the remaining people are nothing to worry about." An elder immediately said, "Elder Kim, are you talking about Sun Huaying, Hua Xian, Zhou Huang, and Zhang Yan?" Elder Kim laughed and said, "I believe everyone here can see this clearly. There's no need to talk about Sun Huaying. This person walks on the path of the killing sword in the Shaoqing 3 lineages sword legacy. No matter if it's your talisman or Daoist technique, it'll be broken with 1 slash. Most of the seniors in our 6 sects who have seen this killing sword technique have already passed away. Therefore, we must keep a close eye on this person. Even if we can't kill him, we must hold him back." At the end, his hair stood on end and he slammed the table heavily. Everyone who heard him nodded in agreement. Feng Haiyang was currently sitting on the first seat on the left. He said solemnly, "Elder Kim is right. Sun Huaying is indeed a great enemy of our generation. Fortunately, the disciples of our 6 sects are united and have a way to deal with him." He turned his head and looked at a cultivator wearing a white robe and a tall hat. He said very seriously, "Junior brother Yuchi, after the duel, you don't need to care about the others. Just hold that Sun Huaying back." Yuchi Yun saw that everyone was looking at him. He took a deep breath and suddenly stood up. He bowed and said solemnly, "I won't let you down." Elder Kim knocked on the table lightly and said, "Everyone, apart from Sun Huaying, that Zhou Huang must not be underestimated. This person is the most outstanding disciple of this generation in the Zhou clan. Rumor has it that he has mastered the spiritual pivot Great Jade Clear Light, which is ranked 2nd among the 16 techniques of the Yuxiao school. This person has cultivated the Heavenly Universe Realm Tome for more than 400 years and has been in the Yuanying realm for more than 200 years. Based on common sense, he should have at least 5 divine arts. He's not easy to deal with." Yuxiao school was located to the south of Donghua. Although it was also considered the Donghua mystic sect, it rarely interacted with the sects in the north. Very few people had fought with Zhou Huang before, so they didn't know much about him. Thus, they could only try to deduce his combat ability from his techniques and cultivation. After hearing Elder Kim's words, many of the elders of the Devil's sect were shocked. Zhou Huang had actually not stepped into the 2nd tier of the Yuanying realm after more than 200 years. It was obvious that he had spent most of his energy on divine arts. On the left, a handsome young Taoist dressed in a red robe sat at the front. It was Yan Huixin, a disciple of the Jiling sect. When he heard this, he thought silently for a moment. Then, he raised his head and said with a smile, "According to the plan, this person should be dealt with by me. I'd like to compare whether this person has more divine arts or the demonic spirits on my banner." Feng Haiyang nodded and said, "Other than junior brother Yan, there's no one else suitable." Elder Kim chuckled and said, "That Huxian of the Qinsang school possesses the qi of metal and fire, and he also has the 9 great sun dragon sparrow spears with him. Many of our devil sect's techniques are countered by him. Junior brother Feng, have you come up with a countermeasure?" Feng Haiyang did not reply. Instead, he turned to look at a female cultivator with an exquisite figure and instructed, "Sun Yangzi, according to the plan that the 6 of us discussed earlier, you'll be the one to deal with this person. Don't fail." Sun Yangzi smiled sweetly and said, "Your humble servant understands." Feng Haiyang nodded slightly. His gaze swept down and said, "There's still one more person. Zhang Yan of the Yaoyin clan. This person was originally a disciple of the Qinsang school and had once attained the first-grade golden core. His mana is so dense that no one in the same generation can compare to him. Furthermore, from the previous few moves, I dare to say that he's definitely hiding an extremely powerful technique. If you guys were to face this person, you must be extremely cautious and not be careless." Sun Yangzi's eyes shone and she suddenly said, "That Zhang Yan killed Yuxiao's disciple Zhou Qingyun and almost fought with Xia Keming." "If we could," Feng Haiyang immediately interrupted her and said in a deep voice, "if the 6 of us work together to deal with the enemy, as long as we have the upper hand, we will be able to win. Why should we be distracted by those sneaky tricks? This is putting us at a disadvantage. Sun Yangzi, when you face Huxian, you are also shouldering a heavy responsibility. There's no need to have any other thoughts." Sun Yangzi's pretty face turned red and she said in shame, "Senior brother Feng is right. I will remember your words." Below the table, Gao Ruowang of the Blood Soul sect seemed to have made up his mind. He slammed the table and volunteered, "Senior brother Feng, you and junior brother Lu have to deal with the others and can't leave. That leaves me to deal with Zhang Yan. My Blood Soul sect has long had enmity with him. This is a good opportunity to end it all at once." The strategy that the 6 sects of the Demon sect had decided on this time was not complicated. Gao, Su, Yan, and Yuqi would come out to fight and try to delay the 4 most powerful people in the Celestial sect. At the same time, Feng Haiyang and Lu Muqiu would work together and try to kill all the disciples in the Celestial sect other than these 4 people in a very short period of time. Then, they would turn around and work together to attack these 4 people. If this strategy succeeded, the Demon sect would definitely win this sword battle. However, the risk was also very high. The key was whether Feng Haiyang and Lu Muqiu could beat the disciples of the other sections. As for the disciples of the Demon sect who tried to delay Sun, Hua, Zhou, and Zhang, as long as one of them lost the opportunity, there was a possibility that they would lose the whole game. It was almost like a gamble. However, there were only 6 people from the Demon sect who were fighting for Jun Yang's essence. They had no choice but to take this risk. Otherwise, they would have no hope of winning. Before this, there was actually another difficulty, and that was how to find their opponents and move according to the chess game laid out by the 6 sects of the Demon sect. This required another method. Regarding this point, the Demon sect had already decided on a plan. Their method was to order all the elders of the Demon sect to block and obstruct the disciples on the road from Chengyuan Gorge to the extreme heaven. This way, they could slowly trap the disciples of the Celestial sect into their trap. However, this would definitely attract the attention of the Celestial sect, the Demon sect, and the guardian elders of the 10 sects and 6 sections. It could be imagined that there would be a fierce and bloody battle at that time. Feng Haiyang cupped his hands towards the table and said with a solemn expression, "I'll leave it to the elders to go to the extreme heaven tomorrow." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.